Here.
Was that you, Mr. Peason?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
All right. So Neil, are you all set? I can start.
Yeah, I'm all set, Fred. You want to
All
give
right. Give me a second.
you want to give the same instructions you gave the other night for the Pledge of Allegiance, or?
Yeah, sure. Before we start, then I'll let everybody know when we do the Pledge of Allegiance, if you want to shut your audio off, a lot of times when you stand up, your camera is facing not at your face anymore. So I will, I'll share my screen with a flag. If you want to keep your audio on, fine, but just be aware that when you stand up where your thing is. So if you want to shut it off for the Pledge of Allegiance, that's fine. So whenever you're ready, Chairman, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Township of Hillsborough Planning and Zoning Department. Tonight is December 17th. This meeting will be conducted virtually. The public will be given an opportunity to participate remotely through the advertised Zoom link or optional phone number identified in the public meeting notice. Members of the public should use the raise hand feature in Zoom or *9 if participating by telephone to indicate you would like to be recognized to speak. Meeting and application documents have been made available at https:// Hillsborough, New Jersey, nj.civicclerk.com/ in accordance with the public meeting notice. Applicants will be presenting remotely and will identify themselves before testifying. This meeting has been duly advertised according to Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, also known as the Sunshine Law. Notice of the 2020 annual meeting schedule has been provided to the officially designated newspapers, to the township clerk, posted on the bulletin board at the Hillsborough Township Municipal Complex, and posted in the township and posted to the township website. Additional notice has been provided to communicate this meeting is being conducted in according to the governor's executive order and pursuant to P-L 2020, which allows for meetings to be conducted electronically and pursuant to the local finance notices recently established. Roll call, please. I'm sorry, I missed it. We all need to stand for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
the United States of America,
and to the republic
For which it stands,
one
One
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all.
May I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Chairman Sirachi, absent. Mr. Wagner,
Here.
Mr. Peason,
Present.
Mr. Santaromita,
Here.
Mr. Scobo,
Here.
Mr. Hestag, absent. Mr. Ciccarelli,
Here.
Mr. Emick,
Here.
Mr. Delcor,
here,
Mr. Lapani,
here,
Acting Chairman Julian,
Here.
Mr. Maskey,
Here,
Mr. Bernstein,
Here.
Mr. Euro,
Here.
and Fred Kinsler and I are here.
You're here.
You're here.
Thank you. Next would be the consideration of meeting minutes. The first set of meeting minutes would be from September 10th, 2020.
Tina, do you have the list?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you. The eligible members are Mr. Wagner, Mr. Lapani, Mr. Sirachi, Mr. Santamarita, Mr. Scobo, Mr. Ciccarelli, and Mr. Emick.
Excuse me, Chairman, this is Fred Kinsler. I think we lost Mr. Scobo, just so we can note it. Keep an eye. I think he dropped out.
Yep. All
So
right.
sorry to interrupt.
So can I have a motion for the September 10th, 2020 to approve the meeting minutes from September 10th, 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to move the September 10th minutes.
Mr. Wagner.
I'll second Santa Romita.
We need a roll call on that.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Santa Romita,
Yes.
Mr. Scobo, did he come back?
No.
Okay.
He is not back yet.
Okay, Mr. Ciccarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Emick,
Yes.
Mr. Lapani,
Yes.
Mr. Julian.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next would be the meeting minutes from October 1st, 2020.
All members, Mr. Chairman, who are present this evening are eligible.
So may I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 1st, 2020, please?
Mr. Chairman, this is Wagner. I will make the motion to move the October 1st meeting minutes.
Ciccarelli will second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Pearson,
Yes.
Mr. Santa Romita,
Yes.
Mr. Ciccarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Emick,
Yes.
Mr. Delcor.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Lapani,
Yes.
Mr. Julian.
Yes.
I don't believe, Mr. Chairman, that the resolution for Sun Power is on this evening. I don't think we've had finalization from the applicant's counsel, so I think that one, unless David can correct me, that one's going to go on in January meeting.
That's correct.
Okay. But we do have sign off on the second resolution, which is the Stephen and Susan Brown.
Okay, do we need any discussion about that, or Mr. Mask, you want to tell us about that, or?
No, it's just as presented.
Okay. So, Eric, you just want to tell us who's eligible to vote on that, please?
Actually, I don't have that resolution on me. So Tina, you got the list.
Yes, Mr. Wagner, Mr. Pearson, Mr. Santa Romita, Mr. Scobo, Mr. Delcor, Mr. Lapani, and Mr. Julian.
This is Fred from IT. I just want to note that Mr. Scobo is back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
He needs to unmute himself, Fred.
Can I have a motion to approve the Steve and Susan Brown resolution file 20-PB12-S?
Peace, and I'll make a motion.
I'll second. Lapani.
Can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Pearson,
Yes.
Mr. Santa Romita,
Yes.
Mr. Scobo,
Yes.
Mr. Delcor. Mr. Delcor,
Yes.
Mr. Lapani,
Yes.
Mr. Julian.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not see any consideration of ordinances tonight, correct?
That is correct. Fred, is there anybody in the public who wishes to speak on business not from the floor?
Sure, we can open it up. Again, if there's anybody on the line who wishes to speak on on matters not on the agenda, if you could raise your hand or unmute your phone, and if I unmute you, please state your name and address and spell your last name for the record. I see none, Chairman, so you can proceed.
Okay, if there's no consideration of ordinances, we will proceed to the applications. So the first application would be the JSM and Hillsborough LLC, file 20-PB-09 MSPV. Counselor, you want to go over this, or?
This is block 155.01, lot 66 and 67, formerly block 155, lot 66 and 67 at 390 Route 206, and vacant land at Andrea Avenue. This is ostensibly known as the Cost Cutters property. The applicant is seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval, see bulk variances and waivers to merge lots 66 and 67 to construct a mixed-use development consisting of a 3-story, 118-unit multifamily building to the rear of the site, the lot 66 portion, and renovate 2 existing commercial buildings and construct a drive-through restaurant on the front portion of the property, the lot 67 portion, with associated parking, lighting, landscaping, utilities, stormwater, and improvements on the property in the mixed-use inclusionary overlay district within the GA Gateway Zone and in the ASD Architectural and Site Design Overlay District. There was Environmental Commission review of this application on November the 9th, 2020. I believe counsel for the applicant is present. Who's going to argue, Douglas?
Mr. Chairman, for the record, I am Doug Wolfson. I am accompanied by Irene Elgart from our company. We are the attorneys for the applicant this evening. Appreciate very much you all being here. And by the skin of my teeth, I was able to make it. I know no one's going to feel sorry for me. That's okay. Just a matter of housekeeping, if the chair doesn't mind, I would like to confirm with Eric that our notice was adequate, the publication occurred, and that the board properly has jurisdiction over the application so that we can proceed tonight.
We have reviewed the materials submitted. We find them to be conforming, and therefore the applicant is eligible to appear before the board for this application this evening.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Excuse me one second, Mr. Bernstein. Does Mr. Wolfson have to be sworn in or?
No, sworn at maybe.
Sworn at, right.
Sworn at maybe, sworn in no.
Okay.
Listen, if you can get through the meeting without Eric swearing at me, that's a big plus.
And I guess we don't need his credentials.
Well, I am a licensed attorney, if that matters.
He is a licensed attorney, a retired Superior Court judge, an individual who has handled a number of affordable housing related matters. He is currently employed by M&M Realty and whatever other subsidiaries exist of that company. And I'm assuming he is more than eminently qualified to appear before this board.
All right, thank you.
Certainly appreciate the honorific. Tonight, I'm just Doug, and I appreciate that very much, Mr. Chairman. And members of the board, thank you very much for allowing us to proceed this way. I know it sometimes is an inconvenience with the Zoom. I find it actually is pretty efficient, and that most of the municipalities like Hillsborough really have it down. And things move very smoothly. We appreciate you all volunteering your time. We understand that except for the consultants and the lawyers, nobody on the board is getting paid. So we do appreciate you giving us your valuable time to listen to and hear this application. As you know, this is a proposed, what I will call redevelopment, although not in a technical legal sense, of what has been referred to by Eric as the Cost Cutter site. We are aware that this site has been what I will call an eyesore for some period of time, and that we hope by way of our application this evening to present to you what we believe to be a very attractive and viable mixed-use development, which includes the retail in the front portion, which is lot 67, and retail and residential to the rear, which is an affordable housing component, which is part of the municipality's affordable housing plan. We do know that the improvement of the site may be deemed fairly important to the town because we believe, and I think the town views it as a gateway type site into Hillsborough's future Main Street. We're pleased to have tried and hopefully succeeded in your view to have designed the site with that in mind and to provide for that mix of uses that we believe is called for in the ordinances of the municipality. Including within the site will be retail in the front, hopefully with a restaurant pad, which will be in close proximity to 206. We have tried, as I think you'll see from the plans and the testimony, to make this site pedestrian friendly. We believe that we've been able to perfectly position this, and it fits in perfectly with the 206 bypass that is contemplated if when the current 206 becomes more like the town's main street. The application in front of you, as you know, is the result of many, many months, maybe even years of discussions. Planning board was actively involved along with Eric and myself and the town representatives in trying to craft an ordinance that would meet the needs of the municipality in a way that the municipality could be proud of, and we are happy to try to join in that and bring that to fruition. Lastly, I know that the board understands and appreciates the toll that the COVID virus has taken, not only on the health and safety of our community, but the economy and especially the retail development, the bricks and mortar retail stores. And this has presented an unprecedented challenge. And as you may have heard, when I was checking on Eric's health, we knew that he had contracted COVID, and fortunately and happily, he's smiling and seems to be doing really well. And we are all, I'm sure, pleased with that. With that said, I would tell you that witnesses this evening, I will be introducing first Ron Allenbeck, who is really the Director of Planning, Design Engineering for the applicant. He'll give you a fairly brief overview of the property, but he also has an engineering background, and he may come in and out with Mr. Bowler, who is our licensed professional engineer, to the extent that some of the questions the board may have relate to the owner's point of view. He is, for our purposes, the representative of the owner tonight. Following Mr. Bowler's testimony, who will address the comments of the township consultants, engineers, and environmental commission, will be our traffic engineer, Mr. Penke. He'll talk about and address the questions of the variances that relate to the circulation and the parking, and the situation of the property and the ingress and egress to it. And then we will wrap up with the ever popular and stylish Christine Cafone, who is really like the quarterback of our application. And she will address those minor bulk variances that were necessitated by trying to do the redevelopment and improvements on the site and make it pedestrian friendly with the residential in the rear. Is it the board's preference to swear in all the witnesses at once or as they testify?
As they testify.
Yeah, we typically do as they testify.
All right, Mr. Allenbeck would lead off, so I would ask you, Eric, or the court reporter or the chair to swear him in.
Up to you, Tina. I'll leave it to you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Allenbeck, yes, thank you. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Sure. My name is Ronald Allenbeck, Aullenbach, Director of Engineering, Planning, and Development for Edgewood Properties, the parent company of JSM at Hillsborough, LLC.
Your witness, Mr. Wolf, is Mr. Allenbeck going to be considered an expert witness, or is he simply an informational witness?
Informational, and as a representative of the applicant in terms of the plan.
Okay.
He does obviously have an engineering degree, but Brad Bowler is our engineering expert for our purposes.
All right, so we won't seek to have Mr. Allenbeck qualified as an expert.
Not necessary. Thank you, though. Appreciate the inquiry. Ron,
Your witness.
give the board the benefit of what we are doing here with a general oversight, 30,000 foot type of view. Don't get too much into the details that Brad will do when he addresses the technical engineering aspects, but let's orient the board to what we're doing so that they have a good feel, as well as members of the public that may be watching or listening.
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. As Mr. Wilson indicated, I am in charge and oversee the engineering department and the planning and development side of Edgewood Properties. I've been doing this for 21 years with Edgewood Properties. This property is as Eric refers to, and we still in our company refer to it as the cost cutter site, because that's what I think everybody remembers it as, has been an eyesore for both us and the town for many years. And there's been talk about the redevelopment, as Mr. Wilson indicated, of this site, of what we could do with it. And we had purchased lot 66 first, which was the cost cutter site, from the previous owner. As we were trying to work through some retail development, trying to get some tenants, figure out tenants, which ones are there, which ones are staying. And ultimately we purchased lot 67, which is the balance of the property that extended from not quite the midpoint, but the midpoint of the property back to Deanna Drive. I've been involved with this project since the company first purchased it, and working with the township and trying to figure out the best development for the site. And we had started conversations with the township, and Dave may correct me, but my recollection was sometime mid 2018, we had started conversations with the township on this site as a potential location for affordable housing and a mixed-use development, and how to make this site work for not only the affordable housing component of what the township's requirement was, but also, how do we redevelop the front site to make it an attractive site, which has been an eyesore for so many years. And working with the town in 2018, and ultimately when the town passed the overlay ordinance in May of 19, we worked closely with the town as to what their ultimate vision was for the Gateway District as you entered into what is, ultimately going to be known as, or what the town wants it to be, their Main Street. Once the 206 bypass takes place, it's my understanding from talking to the township that this area, former area of 206, will be converted to more of a downtown Main Street situation where they're looking to take the 4-lane highway that's there today and make it into a more pedestrian-friendly Main Street feel with a center median, on-street parking, sidewalks, bike lanes, and such of that. So when we were talking to the township and working through the development of the ordinance, it was important to the township that we try to address as many concerns that the town had about making this the entranceway, if you will, to their downtown, because it is the most northern portion of what would be their Main Street. So that being said, we looked at many different options for different types of retailers there. Some were well received, some weren't. Ultimately, it was decided that the best thing to do on a site was just to actually take the existing buildings and what we refer to as reskin them and dress them up and try to release them to future tenants. And then also with the addition of the restaurant pad up close to 206, which is really what the township wanted, was to have that Main Street feel where buildings were pushed up closer to the Main Street to allow for better walkability and pedestrian access. And I think that what we've done with the plans that, Mr. Bowler and the rest of the team is going to discuss with you tonight is try to achieve that vision, if you will, between the developer and the township and the partnership that we maintained going through this process. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Ron. I guess if the board has questions or the public has questions of Mr. Allenbeck as to the overall proposal.
Neil, you have to unmute yourself.
Oops, sorry about that. Does anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Albeck? If there's, Eric, do we have to open it to the public for?
Motion, yeah, open the public, motion open.
Right, so I'm gonna need a motion to open to public for this witness, please.
Frank Del Coro, motion that.
Wagner,
Second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we will open it to the public for questions for this witness.
Okay,
Do you
this is
wanna
the
open it
time where
up?
the public wants to ask questions of this witness, Mr. Allenbach, for this application. If you do, please raise your hand. Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, you can proceed.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness would be Brad Bowler, who is our consulting engineer, and he would need to be sworn in. And unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Bowler. Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And just for the record, state your name and spell your last.
Bradford Bowler, Bohler.
Mr. Bowler, would you be so kind as to provide the board and the members of the public that are listening or watching with the benefit of your expertise and educational background briefly?
Sure. I attended Purdue University. I have a bachelor and a master's in science and civil engineering. I've been practicing in the field of civil engineering full-time for over 15 years. I have a license in the state of New Jersey, which is currently active, and I also hold licenses in 5 other states up and down the East Coast. And I was involved heavily in the production and preparation of these plan sets.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask the board to recognize Mr. Bowler as an expert witness in the field of engineering and site planning.
Yeah, we will recognize Mr. Bowler. Go ahead, proceed, Mr. Bowler.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brad, give the board and the members of the public watching and listening benefit of what your task was and what you did. And then we'll go into the reports from the township consultants, and you can respond to the comments, inquiries, and questions that they've raised.
Sure, I'll present my first exhibit, which will be the aerial exhibit. Doug, give me 1 second.
Why don't we mark that as A1?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. Bowler, can you indicate what A1 is?
Sure, it's an aerial plan of the property. North is to the top of the page. The date of the exhibit is 10/30/2020. And the site, which is 2 lots, is shown in yellow in the middle of the plan. I'll zoom in a little bit just to get a closer view for the purposes of presentation.
Okay.
So as identified up front, the site is block 15501, lots 66 and 67. It's at the northwest corner of Andrew Avenue and 206. Again, north being at the top of the page, with Deanna in the rear. Residential properties are on the west and north side. TD Bank's to the east, and then a Burger King is to the south beyond 206. The lot's just under 11 acres on the site. It's 390 Route 206. And currently there are 2 buildings on the site. They're shown here on the aerial in a white roof on the site. So the current development makes up about half the property. The rear half is a wooded area, and the front half is developed with a shopping center of sorts with the 2 buildings. The current square footage of the current buildings are 53,500 square feet approximately. With access for the site coming from 206, it's a full movement in, so left and right's in, and then a right out driveway. And then along Andrea Avenue, there's a full movement driveway at that location. Under current conditions, about 65% of the parking spaces are up front, where there's a field in the back as well for the site. Along the rear of the property, I'll scroll up a little bit. It will be north of Deanna Drive. There is Royce Brook, which does have a stream corridor from the township's perspective, as well as a DRCC buffer in that area. We don't have wetlands on site, and the wetlands that are along Royce Brook, Deanna Drive do not impact our property. And as I walk through the development, I'll just note to the board before we go to the proposal that we do not impact DRCC or township stream corridor buffers. So I'll pull up my next exhibit. Let me just make sure I can get that one right.
We'll mark this as A2.
Okay.
Could you indicate, Mr. Bowler, what this document is?
So this is the overall site plan for our proposal. It's sheet C301, but it is colorized and rendered with the landscaping plan for the overall development. Again, north is to the top of the page, and I'll zoom in a second here just to get a closer view of the proposal. So as Mr. Allenbeck mentioned, the proposal is to renovate and reskin the existing buildings up front, and those are shown in a light tan color close to the Andrea Avenue text on the site. Again, we're in the GA zone, so those are going to be renovated. A small loading dock's added to the back of the middle portion of the larger building, and we are adding a pad restaurant, drive-through pad restaurant along the front of the property. The overall retail space does increase to about 56,000 square feet on the site. We also propose 118 three-story residential unit, and that's the darker orange in the back of the property on plan top or the north part of the property. The footprint of that residential buildings about 49,000 square feet per story. The height of the residential buildings is about 39 feet 6 inches, and the drive-through facility is 19 feet and 3 inches. There was some discrepancy between the architectural plans and the civil plans, so that's for clarification purposes. With regards to new setbacks for the buildings, the residential property is set back 90 feet approximately from Andrea Avenue, where 10 feet is required. In the rear, we are 116 feet from the property line near Deanna Drive, and then 116 feet at the smallest corner on the northwest side of the property to the side yard as well for that area. For the drive-through restaurant, we are 37 feet from the property line at the corner. The drive-through window itself, in accordance with the ordinance, is 50 feet from the property line. And we do maintain the residential buffer for our drive-through lanes within that area. So the full length of the drive-through area is maintained outside of that residential buffer. There are obviously no changes to the setbacks for the existing buildings. There's no additions or canopies added to the yards along those areas. With regards to access to the site, we maintained our access point along 206 as is, with some modifications internal to the site. And Mr. Penke will get into the DOT regulations with regards to that driveway. And we also improved the access point onto Andrea Avenue. It's still in full movement, but it's been modified to allow for a more accurate truck circulation pattern at this location. With regards to circulation through the site, we maintained the existing conditions of 24-foot drive aisles throughout the property. When we renovated the parking lot up front, in front of the retail spaces, and kept those throughout the back of the residential properties, which is compliant with RSIS in that area. There is a circulation aisle between the residential and the retail space of 30 feet, so that's wider in this area, just to allow for truck circulation and a little bit more space to circulate between the two buildings. We also did provide a number of pedestrian connection points to the right-of-ways. So along the restaurant, we do have a connection point from Route 206 directly into the property. We have one sidewalk that does lead from 206 along the drive aisle into the retail area. And we have one connection point for the residential along Andrea Avenue that goes in that area. And we are completing the sidewalk along Andrea Avenue. Currently along the north side of our access point, there is sidewalk in place, but we do continue sidewalk along Andrea Avenue to the intersection. We do have one interconnection with regards to sidewalks currently proposed on our site, which will be on the west side of the retail and residential. And I understand that in the review letters, there's a couple of comments about additional interconnection. So we propose to add a mid block of sorts, or a midway crosswalk on the east side of the residential building to the east side of the retail building in that location. With regards to parking, we do provide parking for RSIS compliant parking in the rear for the residential, and we do have parking fields mainly renovated and compliant with parking size in the front of the property. 232 spaces in the rear and 138 in the front of the property.
For the board, can you describe how the parking field was prior to this proposed renovation compared to the way it is now?
Sure. So for the retail, correct, Mr. Wolfson?
Yes.
Yes. So previously it was a little bit closer to the right of way. So it basically held the right of way lines. There was a larger parking field where the pad site was, but they were substandard parking spaces and substandard aisles. So in order to meet the code and intent of the code, we added landscape islands to provide some tree areas where you can see the green balls within these areas. There's no currently trees there. We upsized the parking spaces to allow for a 10 by 20 parking space in the retail areas. And that really, and then also added an additional landscape area along the front of 206 and Andrea Avenue. So try to enhance that area as best as possible. Landscaping where it currently is fairly barren with landscaping on the site.
So they're oriented a little better and they're a little bigger and they're landscaped compared to what they were?
Yes.
All right, I'm sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
No problem. There was also a comment about screening along the parking along 206 and Andrea. We do have evergreen shrubs, but they're pulled a little bit further from the parking spaces along those areas. So we've worked with T&M to indicate that we'd pull the landscaping closer to our parking spaces to provide additional screening in those areas. And again, those are all evergreen shrubs that do screen the parking lot, both along 206 and Andrea Avenue in those locations. From a loading perspective, we do have a loading zone in the back of the retail area, which is currently existing. We're modifying it by adding a loading dock for one of the uses, but they would continue to use the loading spaces, the asphalt area in the rear of the property from a loading perspective, mainly for box trucks, I would expect for these retail areas. And we do have a loading space that's substandard from a size perspective, but it does allow for a box truck plus some room in the western portion of the bigger building, as well as a loading space in the in back of the smaller building as well. And the board can also see there's these green areas that are trash enclosures for the facilities in that area. The residential does not have a trash enclosure because it's handled internally and by the maintenance group, so they do not need a trash enclosure on site. That'll all be handled internally. With regards to stormwater for the project, the site is regulated by the township, DEP, and DRCC for reductions in flow from the existing conditions to proposed conditions, and we do meet all the criteria for reductions, which is quantity and also quality reductions with regards to treatment devices. There was a request to add in T&M's letter a treatment device for the front parcel, and DRCC requested the same thing. So we would go through and we would propose to do a treatment device for the front parcel as well to enhance the water quality at those locations.
So let me interrupt you again. I apologize. How does stormwater treatment and handling on site compare to what it was prior to our proposed development?
Sure. So currently it's undetained on the retail area, and that's being maintained from a flow perspective and does drain towards Andrea Avenue and then down into the Royce Brook. Under our proposed conditions, it does drain towards Deanna Drive. There's an inlet at the midpoint of our property line in Indiana Drive. We would connect into that location from our underground detention basin and maintain that flow location, but reduce it based on peak flow rates.
So would you call this an improvement over what was existing on the site in light of the way we're handling that?
Yes, yes.
Again, sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
No problem. We do propose new utilities for the facility, new sanitary sewer lines for the relocation of for the residential building. We also have new water connections for the residential building. We are reusing the water and gas for the existing facilities, but we are tying into along the frontage for the pad site as well. From a lighting perspective, we do have LED lights proposed on site, so more energy efficient lights. The height of the lights are proposed at 18 feet, where 15 feet is required. That's to provide a more uniform illumination throughout the parking lot. We do also have a maximum average of about 1.15, which is a fairly low level light from a lighting perspective for the LED lights on the site. I would expect that we would put the LED lights on timers and or a dimmer option, except for security needs within the center. So as businesses shut down, we would be able to dim some of those lights down to provide less illumination in the parking lot, and then they would be turned on when they're needed again. And then finally, with regards to landscaping, before I get into the review letters, we are proposing to remove the wooded area in the back of the property for the new development. That exceeds the 20% requirement for trees being removed on the site, but that's within the development area as proposed for the ordinance, where we remove 486 trees on the site. We do propose a pretty substantial landscape package for the property. We are proposing over 240 trees on site, so 243 to be exact, and that includes shade trees, ornamental, and evergreens. We do have over 1,200 shrubs on site. I mentioned before the screening for the parking lot, but that also is shrubs along the residential property to the west, And that goes the entire length of the development where we're proposing pavement and building. And we have over 1,700 ground cover, perennials and grasses that go throughout the property as well. We did the best we could to place our development as, to minimize the landscape waivers and variances. But we do have a number of those just in general where there's a small variances for things like setbacks to the 50-foot setback to the parking spaces for trees. There are some areas where lights interfere with that requirement, or there's easements within the property where we couldn't put a tree in that area. So those are the things that would prohibit those from happening. Overall, pretty a substantial landscape package. There is one location where we do put a pipe within this back buffer area, which is allowed by the DRCC DEP code. The goal is to propose the pipe to tie into the area. I believe we remove one tree in that location, but we would stabilize that back to existing conditions and let it naturalize again in that area. So there wouldn't be much disturbance. There's probably about a 6-foot trench that would be installed for the pipe, and then that would be left as is, that location.
Brad, let me ask you another question. On the site plan, if my directions are correct, to the west of our development, what is located, those lot and blocks? Is that a residential area?
Yeah, there's single family homes to the, I guess it would be the southwest side, and then there's multi-family homes.
So the landscaping that you're providing there to separate and screen the existing retail buildings from that area, can you give the board and the members of the public that may be interested in listening or watching an idea of how effective that screening will be? I know there was nothing there before, and I know we're adding, but people still want to see and know how it's really going to look.
Sure. So there is a fence that's out there currently that runs maybe the third property from 206 in. We would propose to repair that as necessary. It's, I believe, a board-on-board fence. And then we would also propose to add along, which was not in our plans currently, but we would propose to add a fence along the remainder of the property to provide additional screening. But in addition to that, we would have evergreen trees along the property line. So those would be planted at 6 to 7 feet high. And then in addition, there would be also lower level shrubs that would be in those areas as well. So that would be.
And right now, there's no screening at all between the retail as it presently exists and those residential lots. Is that correct?
There's a couple of evergreen trees that are not in great condition.
All right,
And Mr. Bowler, I would have sticking on the fence subject. I would be interested to know on the, I guess it's the corner of the lot there with the drive in and drive out, in terms of a privacy fence for people who are driving through there at night with their lights on in a car. Will there be a privacy fence to avoid the headlights going into the residential development there?
Yes, if there's not currently a fence there, if there's a gap in the fence, we would either repair or replace that or propose a fence in those locations. So we would propose to have a fence from, I'll call it, 10 feet off the right-of-way line at the 206 side that runs north up to the back of the property.
Yeah, I guess
I'm sorry to interrupt. Mr. Chairman, could we just verify with Ron Allenbeck, since he is the owner's representative, that that's good with him and what he foresees to be done there? Ron, can you unmute and amplify on Mr. Bowler's answer?
Remind you, Mr. Allenbeck, you're still under
Just
oath.
make sure that I understand. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I understand Mr. Julian's question.
Yeah, my question with that is the drive-through area. In fact, we saw another applicant this week, and same situation with a drive-through. At night, if the cars are pulling through there, there's a potential where the headlights could be directed at the residential area. So it might require a different type of privacy fence. I'm not an expert on fences, but I know, like I said, we saw another applicant this week, and that was something that they came back and said, yeah, there's a certain type of fence that will kind of block the lights at night if cars are coming through there as they're going through the drive, and it might require a different type of fence than it would normally on the other areas.
Yeah, currently, what Mr. Bowler talked about, there's an existing, a 6-foot stockade. So there's an existing 6-foot stockade fence that runs along that area right now. That is in one of the professional's letters that talks about, fixing some spigots that might be missing, but it is a solid fence. So it's not a board on board where light may be able to go through on certain angles. It's certainly not an open chain link. It's a solid 6-foot high stockade fence right now that exists there. And we would just maintain that. And there's no way a headlight can get through that.
Okay, yeah, I would just be concerned for the residents and the headlights in the cars.
Appreciate that
Understood. Thank
point.
you.
So I wanted to make sure we satisfied the chair and the board and members of the public.
Just want to be clear. So the entire angle there that you have from in the lane, there's no, if you have second floor houses there, that's not visible from the angle of the fence to the drive-through lane?
No, because the way the cars are coming in front of the smaller retail building as they make the left to go through the drive lane, they're so close to the property line at that point that there's no way the headlights can reach above the 6-foot fence. So they won't reach the second story.
Okay. Mr. Bowler, is that accurate?
Yes, yeah, the angle of the headlights typically don't go above even.
Okay, thank you.
So for the purpose, sorry,
Go ahead.
Mr. Wilson. So for the purposes of the record, I believe it was Mr. Bowler's testimony that the applicant intends to fence and place evergreens along the entire length of the boundary line between from 10 feet off the right of way all the way up that boundary line behind the houses on Meadowbrook, all the way to the boundary line at the end of the applicant's property?
I wouldn't go that far because there is a forested area back there, but we could propose it to the end of the single family homes.
Okay.
Lot 155.02, lot 58.01. Is that where you are, Brad?
Yes.
Applicant's prepared to concur with that?
Ron, I believe so.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Go ahead, Brad.
Actually, I think that was the end of my direct, Mr. Wolfson. So,
All right, so let's deal with the engineers, consultants' reports, T&M, and make sure that we satisfied their concerns.
okay.
We're referring now, members of the board, members of the public, to a report by T&M. I believe it's dated December 4th, 2020.
That's correct. That's what I have.
Do you want to verify, Eric, that that's the most recent report from T&M? There's nothing after that, correct?
Bob?
That is correct.
For the purpose of the record, that was Robert Euro, the board's engineer from T&M. That's fine, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. All right, Brad, go ahead.
So page 1 is a description of what was received. I'll go to page 2. A is a statement of product description. I'll try to go through this quickly. I'll have a group of things together. B 1 through 3 are more comments or statements. Mr. Penke will comment number 4 with regards to DOT access at that location.
All right.
Page 3, Mr. Penke will hit on the parking discussion as well as this phone.
Paragraph 5, you mean?
Number 5 on page 3, yes.
Yeah, let's be specific for the record, okay?
Sure. Number 6 on page 3 is a statement. Number 7, I did not hit this in my direct testimony, but the residential parking spaces will not be assigned at this time. Typically, when JSM operates their facilities, they find that it's not necessary, but they get in a situation where they have to assign parking that's assigned, they will do that, but as of right now, they don't plan to do that. Number 8, I testified to during my testimony. Ms. Cofone will hit on that as well. Page 4, number 9, I provided the location of the loading spaces. Ms. Cofone will talk about the variance itself.
And Carl as well, I would guess, but okay.
Number 10, I provided testimony on the internal operations of the trash for the residential.
All right.
We'll comply with number 11.
All right.
Number 12 is the state highway right-of-way ordinance criteria. So there are 3 or 4 requirements for the width of the right-of-way. So our proposal is for a 50-foot wide half width along 206. And that would meet the criteria for the right-of-way dedication of 97 feet for the entire width, which would be about 48 feet for half width. So we would be 2 feet plus or minus over the requirement for the ordinance. And that would allow for future expansion if we need to for bike lanes, parking spaces, et cetera, along the 202 corridor when the cross section comes into play. We also maintain the sidewalk and landscape areas along the right of way. That's one of the ordinance criteria for this section. So we are compliant with that code section.
Excuse me, Bob Euro, Mr. Bowler. So at this time, is there any right-of-way taking or dedications along 206?
They're already in place.
Okay.
Along this area, there's actually a 17-foot dedication that showed up on our survey on the Tyler report. So that's already been in place.
All right, thank you.
Question though. Go ahead, Brad.
Sure. Number 13 is a variance that will be addressed by Ms. Capone. Number 14, there's a variance indicated for circulation for pedestrians. We had mentioned we would add another crosswalk in the east side of the residential retail area.
And that's not shown on the plan right now.
That's correct. We would be adding that.
So we're agreeing as part of any approval this board deems appropriate to grant that we would modify the plan to include that crosswalk. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So we make a note of that that's a condition if we were to be granted.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
Number 15 is a variance that will be addressed later. Number 16 we'll comply with. Going to page 5, 17 through 19 we'll comply with. Number 20.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was actually going to ask if Mr. Allenbach wanted to address the architectural plans with the garage component.
Exactly what I was thinking. Ron, can you address number 20?
Well, Mr.
Yes.
Allenbach, I'll remind you, you're still under oath.
Yes. So just so everybody's aware that we provide a garage for maintenance.
There's an echo on you, Ron.
Sorry about that. So we provide a maintenance. It's for a golf cart. So I know it's a garage door, but it's more for a golf cart for on-site maintenance. So they go down and access the site for maintenance. And that's what the purpose of the garage is shown on the plans for.
Bob Euro, thank you. Just wanted some clarification on that.
All right. And Ron, is 21 something you should address as well? Children's play area?
Yeah, we'll provide the necessary details for the children's play area.
Thank you.
Is that okay with you, Mr. Yarrow?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Brad, C is the traffic impact, and we'll defer that to Mr. Pankey, okay?
No problem. So then moving to page 7, D1, it's in the bottom of that page. Number 1's a statement. Then it flips over to 8.
That's the stormwater management section of the D&M report, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Items 2 through 4 will comply with on page 8. On page 9, items 5 through 8 will comply with. Number 9 I did not hit on, but there is no adverse impacts to the neighboring properties as part of our model. So and we can provide additional information within the drainage report in the future. Number 10 we'll comply with. With regards to number 11, we'll work with T&M to make sure that we maximize the number of pipes that have the cleaning velocity requested.
Is that okay, Mr. Euro?
Mr. Euro, yes, it is.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brad.
12 through 14 we'll comply with.
13 asks for testimony.
Oh, sorry. So most of the pipes do run internal to the property. Where we do cut and cap, it's in the right of way. So that would be, cut and capped in accordance with the local utility companies' requirements.
All right,
This is Mr. Euro. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Go ahead, Brad. 14.
14 will comply with. Flipping to page 10, items 15 through 24 will comply with.
That's easy. Okay. Utilities.
So utilities, number one, the testimony item is asking for availability of capacity. We've confirmed capacity with the utility companies prior to the design and submission of the application.
Okay.
Number 2 and 3 will comply with.
Well, 2 asks for a note to be added about the installed underground. That's what you're just saying you will agree to, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Flipping to page 11, number 4 is a testimonial about the fire service line. So we haven't sized our MEP sizing yet, but we will work with the fire official to locate the fire department connection, and then our MEP will also size their fire service lines.
Mr. Euro, thank you.
All right.
Section F.
Sanitary sewer.
Yeah, section F 1 through 9 will comply with, and then flipping to page 12. 10 through 12 will comply with as well. Then gradients on page 12, number 1. So there was a request to add a additional sidewalk area to Andrea Avenue to the retail. There's a fairly substantial grade change at this location. So I would ask if we could work with the professionals, planner, engineer to figure out a way to potentially get a sidewalk in that area if we can. If we can't, we would utilize an entrance along Andrea Avenue Way and have a crosswalk, as I mentioned before, on the east side of these buildings.
Mr. Euro, is that okay with you and Mr. Maskey?
Mr. Euro, that's okay. We can work through that.
Thank you very much.
Maskey.
Yeah, that's fine.
2 through 7 will comply with as well. Flipping to page 13, G8 through 9 will also comply with. On H, landscape and lighting, we'll do the best we can to comply with number 1. There is one tree that we do impact slightly, but we'll try to work around that as best we can to eliminate that criteria. Number 2, I mentioned, I guess, briefly in my testimony, but we'll work with T&M to make sure that we bring the landscaping to provide as much screening as possible along Andrea Avenue and 206 as well. Number 3, 4, and 5 are all variances, but 4 does reference the fencing along the western property line to be repaired, and we agreed to do that as part of our testimony. And then number 6 is a tree replacement ordinance criteria as well. We do propose 37 trees because of the ordinance, but we actually do have more than that on our site, 243 as part of the replacement for the project. Number 7 will comply with. Flipping to page 14, 8 will comply with. 9 and 10 are waivers from to enhance safety on site, and I mentioned that we'll dim some of the lights out for overnight, so it'll help minimize the lighting later in the evening on the site.
Is that something Mr. Euro is okay with?
Well, I mean, I would leave that up to the board's decision. The requirement is a 0.5 foot candle. I think you're proposing 1.15. I technically don't have a problem with that. A 1.15 foot candle is not very bright. As long as it's evenly distributed throughout the property, I'm okay with that. But again, I leave that decision up to the board.
Assuming the board is okay with that, you're okay, Mr. Euro, if we work with you to make sure that it's not too bright in the very areas, especially near the residential areas?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
And we do propose house side shields on the lights, so there's no light spillage outside of our property line with the exception of the driveways in those locations.
Thank you.
Okay. And then 11, I touched on some testimony items about dimming and potential timing restrictions. So we'll work with the board professionals to figure out the best way to minimize lighting at late at night.
Mr. Euro here, real quick, item 10, I know you touched on it in your testimony. Again, I think you're looking for relief, 18-foot high pole where 15-foot high is required in town. Again, you'd have to provide justification for that between either you and your planner.
Okay.
What's the impact, Brad? Why are we proposing 18? We're not satisfied it's secure at 15?
The 3 feet does, when you lower the lights down three more feet, you provide more of a hot spot as opposed to uniform lighting. So the 3 additional feet for the 18 feet helps provide more uniform lighting that's less, higher levels, lower levels. It's more of across the board, looks more clean.
You believe it's safer to do it that way in terms of pedestrian or vehicular access?
It does enhance safety slightly by kind of keeping a uniform lighting plan across the entire parking lot.
You see any negative in terms of the impact to the residential area or anywhere else if we were permitted to go to 18 instead of 15?
No, everything's house side shielded, so you wouldn't see the light levels spill past the light poles along the border.
Okay, and then Christine will pick up on the back
Hey,
end.
Doug.
Yeah, Ronnie.
Sorry. I just think it's important to point out to the boards that may or may not be familiar with going into the site that the existing lights that are out there now are more of like a Cobra style, almost like a street light that are in excess of 20 feet right now. So the ones that are in the shopping center now are Cobra lights, which are in excess of 20 feet. So I just want to make sure the board's aware of that we're trying to minimize, what's out there today. So I just want to point that out.
I appreciate that. For the record, that was Ron Allenbeck, and you remember you were under oath, as Eric would remind you.
So, Mr. Allenbeck, just for the purposes of the record, how many of the lights are currently on the site?
How many?
Roughly. I mean, do you have any idea?
Eric? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks to be about a dozen, roughly.
And
Mr. Burns, I apologize. I'm looking at like Google Street View.
not a problem. It's your testimony that
see
they
what
are
lights
20, they are 20 feet high.
In excess of 20 feet, based on what I can see from Google Street View, based on a car next to it.
Yeah, and our office did measure those lights. They're about 20 feet high from a light source perspective.
Mr. Bowler, did you make any calculations as to the current lighting on the site itself at this moment?
We did not calculate the illumination levels of the current lights. Just the height.
Mr. Euro?
Yeah, I don't necessarily need the existing light readings as long as we have uniform patterns for the proposed lights. Understanding that, 18-foot does provide a little bit more of a uniform dispersion of lights across the property. But again, I leave that final decision up to the board.
Upon your with your recommendation, obviously.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Buller, this is Dave Maskey. Just to go on could you just explain the lighting a little bit more in terms of why you need the extra height? How it would be different if you went to the 15-foot high? Because we have the projects on 206 that are sticking with the 15-foot. I just want to know what's the difference from your standpoint.
Yeah, it just creates additional hotspots. So typically you want to keep a uniform level. So you have, instead of having, 1.5 to 2 foot candles across the entire parking lot, or 1 foot candles in our instance, you'd have higher levels that would be upwards of like 3, and then they drop down to 1/2 foot candles. So you'd have that like a wavy effect with regards to light levels. It just creates a little bit more of an unusual situation when you're driving through the parking lot. You see those hot spots of lights with a little bit higher light. It does spread it out a little bit more and keep the same light levels along the parking lot.
With the taller poles, that's what you're saying?
Yes, yep.
And you're saying these won't be visible to the residential neighbors?
The, well, the light itself, the pole will be, but there's no light spillage across to the property
No,
line.
but the poles would be visible, you're saying?
Yes, the poles will be visible. The light source and the light itself would not be visible to the neighbors.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maskey. Go ahead, Brad. Let's
Sure.
turn back up to the PM report.
I think I got through to environmental. I mentioned during my opening statement about the stream corridor. So the stream corridor does align for the most part with this DRCC buffer. So we did propose to develop the property outside of that corridor with the exception of our storm pipe discharge, which goes into the inlet that's along Deanna. And I mentioned that we're removing about one tree in that area with our storm pipe. So we maintain that buffer with the exception of the storm pipe intact. 2 and 3 will comply with. The current LOI was issued. This is number 4. I believe it was earlier this year. So it's still valid for another 4 years on the site, which does not show any wetlands on our property. It also indicates no buffers impacting our property. So the site is clean from a wetlands perspective, which also includes number 5 in the letter.
Mr. Bowler, Bob Euro, just make sure you provide a copy of that LOI to the board and to myself for our records.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Euro.
Going to page 15. So number 6 is a status of permits. We do need DRCC approval as well as flood hazard approval. The flood hazard line is just off the property. It's a small area that does flood, but because we're touching that area with our discharge point, it does require flood hazard approval. Other than that, there's no other DEP review as part of that application.
That application been made?
Yes, an application for both DRCC and flood hazard have been made. I believe they were provided to the board as well.
Has the board been given copies of the applications?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Euro, have you seen those? Or?
I don't recall seeing them, but they may be in our files, but I'll coordinate.
If you have trouble finding them, please let me know and we'll make sure we get copies over to you.
Yeah, we can get a full package if we need to. It's not a problem. Number 7 is a statement. Number 8, we're unaware of any flooding history. Mr. Allenbach, I would assume is the same. There's no unusual flooding on this site, I would expect, but Mr. Allenbach could elaborate further if there is.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And then number 9 is for Mr. Allenbach with regards to underground tanks and status.
By the way, I'm told that the NJDEP LOI was issued on April 9, 2020. April 9, 2020. And if you need a copy of that, Mr. Euro, we'll make sure that we'll get that to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As it relates to the environmental issue, and we have a copy of our phase 1 for the site, and everything on the site has been cleaned up and issued a unrestricted AOC, unrestricted. I still call it no further action letter. I'm not sure what the acronym is now, but the only issue that we have on the site is a groundwater issue. Where the oil tank was and anything that was done with that, the soil has all been clean, remediated, and we have that certification from our LSRP. The only ongoing issue on the site is groundwater, which is going to be ongoing for some time. And that's something we work with the DEP on. But since we have no wells on the site, there's no impact to the construction itself.
Are you referring to an RAO? Ron? But, you know, with the NFA used to be is now an RAO?
Response Action Outcome is the new acronym for NFA.
Got it. Okay.
Mr. Allenbeck, I would, I think in terms of organization, what I prefer to do, or what I'd like to do, I guess, once you're done with this report, we'll go, ask anybody on the board if they have any questions, but then eventually we'll migrate over to the environmental commission letter, because a lot of some of the issues that we're talking about now are on their letter as well. So I'm kind of comparing the two, but I do want to talk about that in further
Right, that would have been
detail.
what we would, that's what we were going to go next to, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so I just for the record, I don't want to cross-pollinate the two reports, but we'll get
No, but
to
there's
that.
but there's an overlap. You're right.
There
to make
is.
the point.
Okay,
It's a fair point, and we're going to address that as soon as we finish with the T&M report.
okay, fair enough.
Brad, I guess we're on general, letter J.
Yeah, and some of these are Ron related for the ordinance criteria, and some of them are civil related. So Ron, do you want to go through the ordinance, or should I pop through it as well?
Yeah, so obviously, everything that we're going to do out here is we're trying to make sure the proposed facility is compliant with the ordinance when it talks about noise, glare, and pollutants and refuse management. This is a rental community we're going to own and maintain. We've never sold a producing property. So everything that we own, that's whether it's an apartment or a retail, we've never sold. So we maintain everything. We have our own crew in-house that maintains all these sites. So we'll continue. It's a simple one person to call for the township if there's any issues or our residents. We're not going to, like I said, not going to be selling this to another developer or to a REIT or somebody else to take it over later. This will be ours, forever until, whether the owner's kids decide to do something different. But for now, the owner's position, he's never sold an income producing property. So he's going to own and maintain this.
How about the next one, Ronnie, the signage?
Yeah, as indicated, I have on my records, and maybe Mr. Maskey can correct me, but I have on my records that we submitted a sign detail sheet that showed the residential signage, which is a monument wall, sign detail, and then also a small monument sign that was proposed along 206. If the board doesn't have that, I do have the exhibit if I need to share it on there, but bottom line, we're going to comply with the ordinance.
Yeah,
And
I'm sorry, Ron, go ahead.
it's okay, Dave.
Yeah, you did submit details for the monument signs. They comply. I don't want to skip to my report, but I just made the comment that when you get around to actually putting up the retail signs, that you would submit a plan that shows compliance at that point. Obviously, you don't know who's going to go in there now.
Understood. And we understand that if whatever tenant we have, if they don't meet the requirements, we're back in front of this board.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maskey. Can you address 3, or is that something that addresses what Mr. Maskey was just
This is
discussing?
Bob Euro. That's been addressed.
All right.
I do have a copy of that signed package. I apologize. Between the testimony that's just been provided, items 2 and 3 have been addressed to my satisfaction.
Thank you, Mr. Euro. Appreciate that. Brad, next, number 4 on the next page.
Okay, so page 16, 4 through 9 we'll comply with. Ron, this is the AC units for number 10. I'm assuming they'll be screened.
Ron.
You've got to unmute yourself. There you go.
I'm sorry. Again, this is Ron Allenbeck. Yeah, they will be all screened from visibility, whether they're for the commercial uses or the residential. The residential units will have individual per unit. There will be some units that are for the common areas, but everything that we use for our site, both residential and commercial, will be screened from the view of the public.
Mr. Allenbeck, Bob Euro, are you anticipating a backup generator?
We've been putting them on our sites lately with everything going on. Generally, we try to find a spot inside the building that's well ventilated that we could provide the necessary louvers. We did that in our job in Somerville. If you're familiar with the Somerville Town Center where Wolfgang's is, we have an internal generator there that is inside a room that when a generator kicks on, the louvers open to provide proper ventilation. I would imagine we're going to do the same thing here, 118 units. It'll probably, Mr. Euro, the generator will probably only be for the residential building, not for the commercial buildings.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Number 11 will comply with that.
Ron, you want to take 12?
Yeah, I think the number 12, if it's okay with the board and Mr. Maskey has a lot more questions about architecturals for both the commercial and the residential. If it's okay, and with Mr. Euro, if I address that when we go through Mr. Maskey's report.
Bob Euro, that's fine.
All right, number 13, 14 will comply with. Number 15, maybe we can lump that into Mr. Maskey's report with regards to hours of operation, et cetera, as Mr. Allenbach testifies that. And then number 16, we'll comply with these, just clarification for NJDEP permits. We have flood hazard. And then that would be the only permit we'd have for DEP on this application.
All right, Mr. Euro, thank you very much.
So I guess the only thing I didn't see covered though in Mr. Euro's report would be the stormwater management though. Is that correct? Or
No, I believe they said they were going to comply with all of my stormwater comments.
okay, I think I missed
Mr.
that.
Julian, I
but
think it was just traffic.
Yeah,
it was-
I think
We skipped traffic.
that's
We'll
correct.
come back to that with Mr. Penke.
So did you say that you'll comply with the stormwater management section?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
If it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I would move now to the Environmental Commission report to make sure that what's
Yeah,
in there.
before we do that, Mr. Wilson, let me ask if anybody on the board has any questions pertaining to Mr. Euro's report
Sure,
for
of
any of the
course.
professionals. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. It's John Ciccarelli, and it has to do with, I guess, the trash. Could you elaborate on saying that trash is handled internally? I know some requests were made for how garbage is going to be handled, as well as recycling. So can you elaborate on what you mean by handled internally?
For the residential component, Ron, can you do that?
Yes, yes, residential, yes.
Yes, so Mr. Gray, what we've been doing in all of our rental communities now is providing a trash room on each floor that allows for recycling and also the trash chute to go down to a trash room where we have a compactor for the residential garbage. We have on-site staff members that will go and collect the recyclables from each floor, put them in a bin and bring them down to the trash room for proper disposal from the recycling company as well as from the trash company. That's all handled, obviously from a private hauler to be determined. We don't know if that's going to be one hauler for both trash and recycling or if it's going to be two different ones, but that's what we've been doing for most of our apartment sites, and that's what we're proposing here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, if nobody else from the board has any.
I have one question, Chairman. This is kind of a typical question for the apartment complexes. Obviously, are there any plans for charging stations for the cars for electric vehicles? We put some in.
Ron?
Yeah, Mr. Lapini, we've actually, although it's not a requirement that I know of in the Hillsborough Ordinance, we actually been adding in at least conduit for potential future charging stations. But we've been, I think in three or four of our current sites right now, we've added them in, even though they weren't required by the ordinance, because it's becoming such a popular, amenity, if you will, for the residents. So I anticipate that we'll have at least 3 or 4 to start off with, charging stations located on the site in the back for the residential.
Okay.
Bob Euro, Mr. Allenbach, can you just make sure if you are at least proposing 3 or 4 at this time, that those locations be shown on any revised site plans?
Absolutely. And just so you know, it'll be an even number. So it's probably going to be 4 because the charging stations themselves come in. It's cheaper for us to buy a duplex charging station than it is single.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
got one other question with regards to the parking, especially on the lot with the proposed drive-through pad I don't know what you propose to put in that building, if it's going to stay a restaurant or whatever. Do you anticipate, how do you figure the number of parking spaces required? And I know based on square footage, but with that restaurant, peaks and valleys of traffic plus whatever might be in the stores, are going to be ample enough parking to facilitate that small lot?
Mr. Lapini, if it's appropriate, I would defer that to our traffic engineer to talk about, because he's going to have to address parking on the overall site.
Okay, very good. That's all.
Anybody else from the board have any questions for T&M's report? Tina, how are you doing? Are you hanging in there? You want to take a break?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask because the dog is barking anyway, so he's got to go out and
Dog's got to go.
Dog's got to go. So it's been almost 2 hours straight.
We're getting up there in time, so I'd like to propose we take a 5-minute break. What time is it? It's like 8:55. We'll come back at 9 o'clock. And Mr. Bernstein, I guess we don't need a motion or?
No.
Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll be back at 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Crazy lady there today?
Mr. Chairman, it's Fred Kinsler. You might want to just have Tina do a quick roll call. I'm sure Mr. Bernstein would have asked that to make sure everybody's back.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you, Fred.
Sure.
I'm just kind of looking at the Brady Bunch boxes here, and I'm just, I guess, waiting for a few more people here.
Yeah. I would call them Hollywood Squares, but okay.
Hollywood Squares.
You're all showing your age.
Oh, sure.
I'm much too young to remember those. It's a good thing I wasn't struck by lightning.
But they're going to be called the Zoom squares now.
Yeah.
After this. So.
Exactly.
Okay. I think I see everybody back beside Mr. Okay, there's Mr. Euro, Mr. Allenbach, Mr. Bowler. Are you guys back?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Tina, would you?
Ron's gonna have to unmute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tina, would you mind doing
Yeah.
a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Wagner,
Here?
Mr. Peason,
I am here.
Mr. Santa Romita,
Here.
Mr. Scobo,
Here.
Mr. Ciccarelli,
Here.
Mr. Emick,
Present.
Mr. Delcor,
Here.
Mr. Lapani,
Here.
Mr. Julian,
Here.
and we have Mr. Maskey,
Yep.
Mr. Bernstein,
Yep.
Mr. Euro,
Here.
Fred.
Yep.
And most importantly, I am here.
The only
right.
important, the
You
only
got that
important
right.
person.
You got that right.
I know.
You were the one
Okay.
person you can't proceed without.
I guess we could
Please,
just pick up where we left
don't
off.
make it any harder for us, please, Doug. You know, all right.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would ask Ron to address the comments in the Environmental Commission report, which
Well, Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Allenbeck comments, does the board want to hear, I think the board wanted to question whether questions of the public as to Mr. Bowler's testimony in relation to Mr. Euro's report.
I thought we were going to finish one witness before we.
I'll leave that up to the board. I'm asking the question of the
Of
chair.
course.
I think that we're kind of still on the same witness or
All
witnesses
right,
type of
not a
thing.
problem.
So I would say let's just continue and then we'll open it up after that.
Okay, so
Witness-
you're recalling Mr. Allenbeck for the purposes of addressing the Environmental Commission meetings letter, Mr. Wilson?
That would be correct. And that's the letter from the Environmental Commission dated December 4, 2020. I just want to confirm that there's nothing subsequent to that the board has.
Mr. Julian, as the representative of the Environmental Commission, is there a subsequent letter from the commission to that one?
To the one that's dated, let's see here. The one I have was
December
received
4th.
December 4th, right?
That's the one I'm referring to.
Okay.
Just want to make
yeah.
sure nothing happened after that.
No, that's the one.
Okay, excellent. Ron, you are still under oath, as Eric would remind us. Can you take a look at that Environmental Commission report as the owner's representative and go through it and explain to the board and members of the public that may be watching or listening what our responses to the various provisions are?
Yeah, and Mr. Julian, I'll try to do my best to address this. Obviously, environmental is not my background. I'm going from some notes I got from Neha Guham, who was on the Environmental Commission meeting call and explained some of the information there, but I'll try to do the best I can. So if the board's permission, I'm going to refer to page 2, which is where the I guess the comments come from the commission as to what they're looking for us to do. And I'll start off with the first comment where it talks about the preliminary assessment. It's almost 8 years old. He's asking for an updated one. We would be obliged to comply with that. There has been some other reports, Mr. Julian, that were done subsequent to that, specifically for the dry cleaners. So obviously whatever updated phase 1 would include those additional documents. So we'll be happy to make that a condition of any approval for here, the Environmental Commission, to submit that.
Okay, great.
Relative to the former underground heating oil tank. As I indicated, again, talking to my environmental staff and the memo I got from them, that based on the 2019 soil analytical results and historical groundwater results of monitoring well number, it was determined that no further action was warranted for the former underground heating oil tank. And again, we'll provide that information to you.
So is that?
As it relates to the dry, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, do you have a letter, no further action letter?
I'm sorry, the memo just says no further action was warranted. I have to check my LSRP, but I believe they do have something if they're putting that in the memo.
All right, yeah, I would ask that you send that to the township, please.
That'll be one of the conditions.
Absolutely. As it relates to the dry cleaner, as indicated before, there is a groundwater issue on site that we're still dealing with. That kind of leads into the next question about or at one point, the vapor intrusion. Again, in speaking to my environmental staff and Mr. Julian, again, I'll provide all this documentation to you through our LSRP so that you have everything proper. But the SSDS, and I'm not sure what that acronym stands for. I find it in the memo here. Was decommissioned on August 27th, 2020. So no further vapor intrusion is required. And again, I'll provide those documents to both the township and the environmental commission.
Yeah, I mean, just for the record, yeah, we didn't know that at the time of the meeting. So it was the commission's concern that the vapor intrusion issue was close to the proposed buildings where residents might be. So, we had read the report that there were concentrations in order of magnitude greater than the vapor intrusion. So if there is that letter, we certainly would make that a condition of approval.
Absolutely. And to your point, there was a vapor intrusion investigation in February and May of this year. And the SSDS was turned off, indicated no TO-15 compounds at concentrations exceeded the NJDEP. Of the subslab soil gas samples collected exceeded the limit. So we'll provide that all to you. And again, Mr. Bernstein, it could be a condition of any approval this board may grant us.
Okay.
The last thing in the letter talks about the flood hazard, and I will defer to Mr. Bowler on that one because it talks about the boundary and
The boundary, what? I'm sorry, you broke up. Oh, you're on mute. That's why.
You muted yourself, Mr. Allenbach. There you go.
I'm sorry. The letter talks about the boundary of the flood hazard area.
You're deferring that to Mr. Bowler.
Correct.
All right, Brad, are you unmuted?
Yes, I am.
All right, could you address that, please?
Yeah, so the boundary is based on elevation mapping, state study and FEMA maps. And you use if it's a FEMA map, you use 1 foot higher than the flood elevation, and you use topography around the site to verify that. So we used, in this case, a FEMA map because that was more recent. The DEP is going to accept that. And then we used topography that was picked up on the survey to identify that location of the floodplain.
And then, Mr. Bowler, that was something that you said that you still need the flood hazard permit from the DEP, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So that's in Mr. Euro's report, and obviously that'll be a condition of approval as well.
That's fine. Yes.
Okay. Good. I'm sorry.
All right, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would move over to the November 17, 2020 report from the Bureau of Fire Safety. and ask Mr. Allenbach to address those issues as well.
Before we go, Mr. Wilson, let's just see if anybody else from the board has any questions on the Environmental Commission report.
Sure, of course.
Does anybody on the board have any questions on that report for the professionals? Okay, please proceed, Mr.
Yeah,
Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. A
Go
little
ahead.
late. On page 1 of the Environmental Commission report, the commission requested the following in the second bullet. The commission asked that they show the 150-foot buffer indicating the township stream corridor.
Right.
Going to indicate that on the plan?
Yes, we will.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Maskey.
All right, Ron, unmute, and you have a copy of the fire safety memo dated November 17, 2020.
I do.
Can you just go through those comments for the board, please? And the members
Sure.
may be watching or listening.
Sure. Again, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It appears to be 11 bullet points on here. Bullet point number 1 is a statement we agree to comply with, where it just says the fire hydrant locations will be approved by the fire marshal. Second bullet point, we agree to comply with. Bullet point 3, we agree to comply with. 4, 5, we agree to comply with. 6, Brad, I just want to ask you a quick question while you're on the phone. The dumpster located behind the smaller retail building, not the pad, is obviously closer to 20 feet. I know it's not any kind of ordinance or restriction, but it looks like we're probably only about 10 feet away or 6 feet away. Is that something that we could potentially make a smaller dumpster, slide that to the north to comply with this?
Yes, yep.
Okay, thank you. Building
And
addresses. we agree
the
to-
plans will
I'm sorry.
reflect that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Building addresses, we agree to comply with. Fire hydrant, we agree to comply with. Documentation for the underground to support a fire truck, we agree to comply with. Both the last 2 comments, 2, 4, 6, 8, well, both 11 and 12 is my number here. Obviously, we'll comply with whatever the building code requires. I'm not sure it's based on what fire code you use, based on the size of the square footage of the building and the fire pressure. So without doing those fire flow tests, square footage of the building, we agree to comply with whatever the building code and the fire code requires us to do.
Okay. Any questions from the board on the fire report? Okay.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that is the conclusion of the testimony from what I'll call the engineering side. So perhaps this would be an appropriate time.
Hey, Doug.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ron.
Doug, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Maskey, I don't know at what point we go through Mr. Maskey's letter.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to mention as well.
I'm starting to feel left out.
Yeah,
I never.
I wasn't going to forget you, Dave. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we still have Mr. Maskey's
Sorry,
report.
that's my fault. It's the October 20 letter from 2020 from Mr.
Right.
Maskey. I apologize, that was my fault. Ron, you want to go through that or defer to Christine on the planning issues?
Yeah, there's a couple of issues in here that will either be deferred to or were answered to by Brad, or go to Carl or Christine based on traffic and planning. But Mr. Chairman, it's appropriate. Again, we're looking at this is Ron Allenbach under oath, October 20th, 2020 memorandum from Mr. Maskey to the planning board.
Correct.
On page 1, it's just an overview of what was submitted. We'll continue on to page 2, and then it talks about an overall summary of the project as well as the development and district standards. So I'll start on page 3 if it's appropriate. One of the comments that Mr. Maskey's concerned about or raises was the height of the building. Mr. Bowler testified earlier that the residential building is 39 feet 6 inches, and the restaurant pad is 19 foot 3 inches. The plans will be revised to reflect that. Under 3.1, we agree to comply. On the 3.2A, it's a statement.
Mr. Hollenbeck, just quickly, there's a few
Sorry.
places where the conservation easements will be required. You're okay with that?
Yes, sorry
Okay.
about that. I missed that. Yes.
Okay.
On top of page 4 under 3.2, B, Brad talked about the pedestrian connections, where we can add an additional crosswalk. C will be done by our planner. Mr. Maskey disagrees. 3.3 appears to be all statements that we comply with. 4 is parking, which I will defer to Mr. Pankey for the entire, well, Mr. Pankey and Ms. Cafone for the parking because it's related to traffic and variances. Loading at the bottom of page 5, it continues on page 6. Again, this traffic and Christine. Pedestrian circulation talks about variances. That is, it will comply. Number 7, a bus stop. We have not received any documentation from the school board. We'll obviously work with them to determine if in fact they're going to come into the site and make sure we provide an appropriate location. So I guess it will comply, but we'll work with the Board of Education. Under refuse, those are all will complies. Under 9 is a statement. The first paragraph is a statement. The second and third, when I answered earlier, again, we're going to agree to comply with the ordinance. If we don't, we'll come back to this board. Number 10, I believe, unless Mr. Maskey talks differently, I believe Mr. Bowler addressed that with the stream corridor.
Well, just
Small indication, a small area.
Oh, Ron, hello.
Yes, I'm here.
There you go. Okay.
I'm here.
On the stream card, part of the comment was though, how the card, not only would it have to be shown in terms of 150 feet, but how it might be replanted and restored, and where you're going to put the conservation sign. So can you add those details?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Under landscaping lighting, we agree to comply. Variance for the tree mitigation, Christine will talk about.
Yeah, can we just?
Go ahead, Dave, I'm sorry.
Because I heard some numbers on that. So the original application said there'd be 37 evergreen trees and a cash contribution to cover the balance. Is that not the case now? I heard 243 trees.
Mr. Bowler will correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Mr. Bowler, the 240 number was the number of trees on site. They don't all qualify for the tree replacement. So we're still looking at the contribution.
You would make the cash contribution. Is that what you just said?
That's correct.
For the balance. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Under paragraph 12 on top of page 8, again, unless Mr. Maskey disagrees, I believe Mr. Bowler talked about with this there for.
Sorry, Ron, you broke up. I believe Mr. Bowler talked about. Oh, he's
We addressed what's required by the ordinance by providing the necessary right of way.
Did you get that, Tina?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was on.
Yeah, it's Ron, you're kind of going in and out sometimes, so it's hard to hear.
Yeah,
everything.
I think it's my internet here. I apologize.
Okay.
13, we agree to comply. 14, we agree to comply. And 15, all of the architectural agree to comply.
All the architectural
Comments, we agree to comply.
Thank you.
All right, so Dave, do you have anything else you need to address on the report?
Not at this time.
Does anybody else on the board have any comments on Mr. Maskey's report?
As to the extent it was addressed in the testimony either be by Mr. Allenbeck or by Mr. Bowler, there are other individuals who will testify as to Mr. Maskey's report, I believe, from the applicant.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right, so I think at this time, we would open it to the public to have any questions for either Mr. Bowler or Mr. Allenbeck. So we already have it open to the public, right, Eric?
That's correct.
So Fred, do you just want to take it from here then?
Sure. Okay, so if anybody in the public listening would like to ask a question to either of those two witnesses, please raise your hand. When asked to unmute, again, please state your name and address, spell your last name for the record. Again, these are questions for these two witnesses on their testimony. Chairman, I see none, so I think you can proceed.
Okay. I guess at this point, then we can take your next witness then.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness will be Mr. Penke, who will be our traffic consultant. Perhaps you could swear him in now.
Mr. Penke. Right, where are you? Why can't I find? Oh, there you are, there. Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great.
Carl, could you please give the board and the members of the public that may be listening?
Before we get to that, Mr. Penke, could you place your name on the record, spell your last name, and by whom you are employed, and then I'll leave that to Mr. Wolfson thereafter.
Yes. So for the record, my name is Carl with a K, Penke, P as in Peter, EHNKE, and I'm a vice president with Langen Engineering and Environmental Services.
Mr. Wolfson, your witness.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Carl, would you be so kind as to give the board and members of the public that may be watching or listening the benefit of professional qualifications?
Sure. I am a registered professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, as well as several other states. I have been practicing engineering for over 35 years. My area of expertise has been traffic engineering over that time period, and I regularly appear before planning bodies throughout the state of New Jersey, including this board in the past, and qualify as such.
Chairman, I would ask the board to accept Mr. Penke as an expert field of traffic engineering.
We will accept Mr. Penke.
All right, thank you very much. Carl, will you tell the board and members of the public that may be watching or listening what your involvement is in this project and what your reviews entailed? And in doing so, I guess, or following that, let's go through the engineering report to the extent that it was deferred to you with regard to the traffic, parking, et cetera.
Certainly. So my involvement was the preparation of a traffic impact study dated May of 2020 that was submitted in support of this application. And that study basically documents the anticipated traffic generation from the site and the operations of the driveways and so forth. And then also involved with evaluating the access, circulation, parking, and pedestrian circulation components of the plan as the plan is developed.
Can you provide the board with the benefit of your analysis? And maybe the best way to do that, I'll leave this to your discretion, would be to go through the T&M report insofar as it addresses those things that were included in your survey and analysis.
Yeah, I think I could just give a summary and touch on the items in the report in some direct. So with regard to the traffic impact study, when we filed this application back earlier in the year, unfortunately, we were already experiencing the impacts of the pandemic. And that has been an interesting time for all of us. It has also created some challenges for us in the transportation engineering fields, obviously. However, luckily, I've been involved with this property as the applicant has been looking to redevelop it for quite some time. So we have had the opportunity to utilize the data that was collected pre-COVID back in 2017 on the adjacent roadway network, which is a representative sampling of traffic flow. So since we had that data, we utilized that data rather than trying to collect new data and adjust it based on the unknowns of what COVID has done to the traffic flow during the peak periods.
to bring that data forward, we do have the ability, the data published by the Department of Transportation, who on a yearly basis updates the general growth patterns that they record on the roadway systems. That's based upon data that they collect at their monitoring stations. So we're able to use their established growth rates to take the 2017 data and bring it current and in fact project it forward to our design and build year. And in this case, we use the design build year of 2022. So I'm confident that the traffic data that we presented provides a reasonable picture of the traffic flow 1206 and Andrea Avenue as it existed pre-COVID. That being said, the Hillsborough is about to experience a tremendous benefit associated with the construction of the Route 206 bypass, which is actually going to change the character of the road adjacent to our site from a traffic volume standpoint, and then ultimately down the line with the township vision from a character standpoint as you advance forward with planning for changing the cross section of the road, including parking on the road, making it more pedestrian and bicycle friendly. So there's some good things happening adjacent to the site as a result of the bypass, which ends just to the north of us. Given the fact that the bypass is imminent, when we prepared the report, we did need to make projections as to the actual reduction in traffic on Route 206 that'll occur. We did have the opportunity to reach out to DOT, try to see their planning studies. A lot of those planning studies were dated as the planning for that bypass goes way back. However, you know, in general, the understanding is that the traffic flow along this section of 206 should probably decrease by 50% or better. For purposes of the traffic study, we wanted to be a little more conservative. So we did about a 30% reduction of the traffic flow on 206 as being diverted to the new bypass section. And that's all documented in the traffic report. But yeah, as you're aware, the site itself has been underperforming for years now. It's been a relatively quiet site with the loss of bus cutters and then associated loss of other tenants through the years. So in preparing the traffic study, we did make projections for a full reoccupancy and active use of the spaces that are being maintained and skinned and rehabilitated for new leasing. And then we made projections for the minor increase in the commercial area with the addition of the out pad sort of tucked in up against Route 206 into that inutility of a corner, the point, so to speak, of the property. And then, of course, as well as for the other 118 proposed residential units. And again, that's all documented in the traffic report. Overall, the net increase in traffic associated with the small retail addition and the residential is a relatively modest increase in traffic flow. It's approximately about, in the PM hour, about 51 additional entering vehicles over an hour and 41 exiting vehicles over an hour, and similar increase on Saturday. That being said, you know, obviously the residents and the town hasn't experienced the full occupancy of the site for a while. So the access designs are accommodated to accommodate the full generation of both the existing space and proposed space. And at the end of the day, when the site's fully leased and occupied, we would expect approximately 230 entering and exiting trips during the evening peak hour distributed to the driveway system. So the traffic study analyzes those numbers, takes that into account as we evaluated the operation of the access for this property. From an access standpoint, I think it's relatively good news. We're not adding any new points of conflict. We have a driveway on Route 206 and an existing established driveway on Andrea Avenue. So we're not changing any driver expectation. The driveways have been there. The driveway on Andrea Avenue, as testified to by Mr. Bowler, is going to be improved geometrically slightly. And will continue to be located where it is. If you had an opportunity to read through the traffic study, you'll see that the driveways are all projected to operate at good levels of service. In addition, the intersection of Andrea Avenue and Route 206, which will experience that reduction in the northbound, southbound traffic, is also projected to operate at very good levels of service C during all the peak periods. The analysis did note that the northbound approach on 206, particularly the left turns, operate at poorer levels of service. That's actually a function of the timing that DOT is employed at this intersection because of the heavy volumes that had existed on 206. They were using long cycle lengths. We do anticipate that once the work is complete, that DOT can re-optimize these signals down to more appropriate lower cycle lengths, which will provide more advantage to the side street approaches. And that was evident in the analysis also. So overall, the access driveways will operate at good levels of service, accommodate the traffic, and the traffic will be accommodated on the adjacent roadway system. A couple of things with regard to the project. There is a waiver requested for a number of loading areas. I think the ordinance requires 3 for the retail and 1 for the proposed outpad. We are not proposing any specific loading areas for the new outpad. And the existing retail itself actually does have loading areas. We're constructing 1 new loading dock, but as Mr. Bowler testified to, there are loading areas to the rear of the buildings that are close to the rear doors that are outside the circulation system that function as loading. It's not unlike the loading for the town center retail, the retail down by where Five Guys are at Adelphia Road. And I would point out that you have examples of small restaurant pads such as Burger King and Taco Bell that don't have designated loading spaces. And those function because a lot of those uses take their loads off peak hour. Many of them take night drops now when there's really no other vehicles on the site. So we're comfortable that the loading will function properly on the site as proposed. We are requesting a variance from the number of parking spaces. The parking for the residential complies with the residential site improvement standards, both in the number of parking spaces as well as the design of those parking spaces with 9 by 18 parking stalls and 24-foot aisles. For the commercial, we are seeking a deviation where your ordinance requires 202 parking spaces. We are proposing 138 parking spaces. I think Mr. Bowler touched on the reasons why the parking has been reduced, but to rediscuss those in relaying out the parking, the pedestrian circulation, the landscaping, the setbacks, all desirable elements of which your ordinance wants to achieve on this site. It removed that sea of pavement that exists out there today, and cut back the ability to provide the number of spaces that are out there today. As the owner has evaluated the site, they're very comfortable that the parking provided will support the tenant types that they expect will emerge for this property. We would note that if we thought there was a problem with parking, we could have actually sought a waiver or variance from the 10 by 20 parking space requirement, which actually is a rather excessive size for a parking space, given that national standards for retail commercial uses is 9 by 18, and we would have picked up probably another 15 to 20 parking spaces in the fields with that type of striping. But we don't think we need it, and we're comfortable with the larger spaces meeting your ordinance. That being said, we are asking for a design waiver from the width of the drive aisles throughout the site. Your ordinance requires a 30-foot width. We're providing a 24-foot width throughout the site, with the exception of the east-west spine road that's between the commercial and the residential. That's 30 feet wide. The 24-foot aisle is more than appropriate. It provides the proper maneuvering into and out of parking spaces. In fact, the standard nationally for retail design is a 9x18 parking space with a 24-foot aisle, similar to the residential development design in the back. Just wanted to touch, there was a question arising when Mr. Bowler was testifying with regard to the parking sufficiency near the new retail pad. In that area of the retail pad, that area is sort of an underutilized area today. While parking extends down there, it really doesn't relate to anything. So it's actually a nice little area to tuck that retail pad in. But that entire area that's serving the 2,500 square foot new retail area, as well as the approximately 8,000 square foot smaller of the two existing retail buildings, has 42 parking spaces. So it's actually pretty well parked in that area, about 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet, which is a pretty good standard for supporting that area. So I think that area is actually well parked and will operate sufficiently to service the tenants and the needs in that particular area. With regard to the bus route through the site, it's an interesting question because bus routes are established on a yearly basis by the school board, and they can change from year to year based upon the demographic needs. However, this site is designed to accommodate larger vehicles that are needed to arrive at the site for the commercial elements, and certainly can accommodate the turning movements of a bus. And I would expect that a bus route will probably simply come in on the east-west spine road between the residential commercial, stop somewhere in there, and then either exit on 206 or do the reverse, come in from 206 and exit onto Andrea. It's a pretty straightforward maneuver, and it's atypical for the school to circulate a bus actually through the parking lots of any multifamily development. So I think the site lends itself to a couple of different routes that the board can consider, and as testified to, we'll reach out to the applicant will reach out to the school board and wrap that up. With regard to, there is a comment in the engineer's letter about installing a no left turn sign on northbound Route 206. We've actually looked at that further, and lefts are permitted on 206. There is no restriction on lefts. We'd like to maintain that ability for convenience into the site. And I would respectfully suggest that shortly, with the reductions in volumes on 206, it's actually appropriate to maintain that ability to make the left in, and is more in keeping with the ultimate vision of 206 becoming a business street rather than the thoroughfare that it has been through the years. So I think it's appropriate, and we would ask that we defer on that request in the engineer's report. And with that, I think I have touched on everything. Again, with I guess maybe a little bit more on the parking. As I've indicated, the applicant is comfortable that the parking fields will support what they're pursuing. And we really believe that what's been achieved with the sidewalk connectivity being completed on Andrea Avenue, the landscaping, the removal of the pavement on the east side of the building up against Andrea Avenue, and landscaping that rather than keeping asphalt and squeezing in parking there, all are enhancements that are going to attract tenancies of these buildings. So the owner is comfortable with what we're requesting and believe that it will be sufficient for his needs.
How does the parking situation that we are proposing compare to what was on the site with the existing structures, dealing only with the commercial?
Well, I mean, as Mr. Bowler testified to, I mean, everybody's familiar with the site. It's a sea of parking, probably never has been utilized. Some of it's also some of it's substandard, some of it's remote from the buildings, and some of it's tucked along the sides of the building. It's just basically a sea of pavement that's been striped. So I think there's better order. There's certainly better pedestrian circulation and connectivity. The plazas in front of the buildings are improved. Sidewalks along Andrea are completed. It's really pulled all elements of transportation, pedestrian linkages, and walking together to start to bring the vision on the Main Street together and the Northern Gateway, starting to clean things up.
What about the potential for conflict between the residential and commercial portion? There've been some requests for internal walkways to some connectivity for pedestrian friendly access. Are you comfortable that with the internal circulation is designed, it minimizes or eliminates or avoids any conflicts between unreasonable conflicts between the residential and the commercial?
Yeah, Mr. Bowles, the plan includes a crosswalk at an appropriate location on the internal, and as was discussed by Mr. Bowler, we believe we can add an additional one closer to the driveway connection to Andrea Avenue, and we'll do so. So that connectivity is appropriate. Basically, taking the sidewalk system running down both faces of the residential and providing a logical walking path to the commercial, as well as to the external roadway system, external sidewalk system.
That would conclude our testimony, Mr. Chairman, from our traffic engineer.
Yeah, Mr. Pankey, Mr. Wolfson just kind of took the thought out of my head, which is obviously with these mixed use developments, there's a lot of different things going on. You have retail, residential. So we're always concerned about safety. I mean, you're picking up, dropping off school kids. You have residents there, retail, drive-in. So I guess if you could just speak to the overall safety, I guess, which is the question that Mr. Wolfson was just brought up. But if you want to just take a second and comment on that, please.
Sure. So safety is really a function of the design elements, both the cartway, roadway widths, or drive aisle widths, as well as the pedestrian connectivity. So, from the access drive aisle widths and the feed into the site, I think we actually have a hierarchy of street systems. You have a main road that comes in, or drive aisle that comes in from 206, and then feeds off into the parking areas in a logical manner. And the same thing from Andrea Avenue. We have a main drive aisle that properly comes in, sort of like the local street, so as you would have it, that then connects into the parking areas. And along both those elements, there are sidewalks provided. And then from those sidewalks, there are pedestrian linkages that lead both back along both faces of the residential, as well as along the faces of the commercial. So there is a very complete pedestrian vehicular system here that is logical, has good geometry, and is certainly set up to accommodate the types of vehicles that will enter and exit the site. And while it is a mixed-use property, there is also a logical separation of the residential parking elements and pedestrian elements, the pool area, and so forth, away from the commercial. So there's some logic in the thinking of how that's laid out.
So let me ask you a question following up on the chair's question, because safety, of course, is paramount importance to the board, the public, and us as well. Does the phasing of the various traffic peaks impact safety? So I'm not the engineer, but for example, the school buses are early in the morning. People go to work before the retail opens up. Do those things impact or reduce or increase potential for conflict?
Yeah, not really. I mean, volume isn't really the issue. It's the geometry. I mean, school buses, school activities, trucks, they're part of our road system on a daily basis throughout the day. So it's really, safety isn't about the volume and mix of vehicles. It's about the geometry. It's about sight lines. It's about pedestrian ways and proper signage and crosswalks. And all those elements are involved on this property. Certainly commercial has its peak activity during weekends and when you don't have school in session. So you do have some ebbs and flows from that standpoint, but it's, your real issues on safety now is really the design elements that provide the safe geometry, the safe sight lines, and so forth to accommodate those vehicles that are part of the roadway mix that we all deal with, as we travel the roads.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Penke. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Maskey and Mr. Euro, did Mr. Penke address all of the items in both of your reports?
Bob Euro, just a couple things. With regards to item B4 in my December 4th letter regarding the left turn movement from 206 into the property, based on Mr. Penke's testimony, I am okay with that left turn movement remaining. So I see no need for any restrictions on that movement. Just one further item, Mr. Penke, I know Mr. Bowler touched on potential delivery trucks on site. I think he mentioned box trucks. Can this site accommodate tractor trailers if they tended to get on the property?
A tractor trailer could make its way through the main access aisles to the rear of this property, and I think that's the intent of creating the one larger loading area for a potential big box user that gives them an area for that. So yes, that could happen, but from the experience of the owner, these types of plazas and the types of tenants they're seeing have mostly been serviced by the smaller vehicles, the single units, the larger single units, but single units.
Okay, thank you. And this next question may be for Mr. Auerbach regarding times of deliveries, times of garbage pickup, etc. Just so we can get something on the record for those anticipated truck movements.
Yeah, well, your truck movements are going to be generally it's tenant driven, quite frankly, in how they operate. Like I said, the restaurant pads, a lot of the restaurant pads now, they'll take night drops, so that they're not dealing with goods deliveries during their business hours. So it's somewhat tenant driven from that standpoint. And the same thing on your refuse collection. It's really based on volume. If it needs to be picked up twice a week, it'll be picked up twice a week. So we have a little bit of an unknown from that at this standpoint, but certainly any loading and deliveries will comply with any ordinance requirements on such that may or may not have any restrictions on that.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Penke, I might be missing it, but at the two entrances to the site on Andrea and Route 206, I don't see any crosswalks. Are there planned for there?
There should be a crosswalk on both the Andrea Avenue driveway and the main driveway. If they're not, we'll make sure that they're added.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Mr. Maskey.
Any comments or questions from anybody on the board for Mr. Penke?
Mr. Chairman, I'll follow up since I asked a question prior in the testimony that Mr. Penke gave on this, particularly the smaller lot with the proposed restaurant. Obviously,
I'm sorry, Sean, with the proposed what? You broke up.
Restaurant pad. So we don't know what the tenants are going to be on that side. There is an existing restaurant in there now that we can only assume will stay there upon the completion of the project. Is there a difference in the rate of configuration of parking spaces based on restaurants versus your normal retail space due to the fact that obviously people aren't necessarily carpooling to go to eat restaurants?
Yeah, so there is varying rates out there for various types of tenants. Overall, the blend for a mix of uses usually results in lower rates because of the different peaking characteristics of different users, including restaurants. Like for instance, a Dunkin' Donuts is extremely busy in the morning, but after 10 o'clock in the morning, really dies down, which would pair well with say a Chinese food restaurant that's doing its business at lunch or in the evening hours. But in the case of the particular area, your ordinance actually for restaurants is 4 spaces per 1,000, and that little block area has 42 spaces in it. So even if the entire smaller existing commercial building and that 2,500 square foot building we're adding in that corner, we're all restaurant, you'd actually be meeting your ordinance for that lot with the 42 spaces.
Okay. Because I just, from experience seeing, for example, that at the restaurant in there now, Cafe Graziella, there's a lot of small two-top tables, so there's a lot of twosomes coming into that restaurant. And on a Saturday, there could be 30 to 40 cars in that parking lot alone on a weekend for dinner from 7 o'clock to 11.
Correct.
Obviously, the restaurant on the pad proposed could be pulling in there on the drawing you submitted of a proposed restaurant has 15 tables in it. So that could potentially have another 15 cars if they're both full, obviously. So that could create a bottleneck of traffic and parking in that one lot, especially on nights and weekends, which would then make people have to overflow park on the other side of the road or other parking lot. We talked about safety of people having to cross that road to get to the restaurants.
Right, so you do have the ability to work into that other lot. You do have some synergy in the types of differences in restaurants that you might have, like a fast food is not a late evening type demand versus a higher end restaurant, which will go into the evening hours. So you do get synergies from that standpoint with one peaking at different times. But that being said, if you look at the site plans carefully, there is properly demarcated crosswalks between the smaller commercial building to the pedestrian areas in front of the larger commercial areas, which gets you into the larger parking lot. So if you had a retailer in the larger parking lot that was, dying down after 6, 7 o'clock at night, you'd be able to share into those spaces too. So it's that synergy of the ebbs and flows of the different tenants in here that the owner thinks and is anticipating he'll be able to bring to the table, that he expects he'll be able to adequately serve the needs of his tenants. And it's important that he be able to do that, obviously, for the success of his tenants.
Well, the other topic I would like to bring up to that is your egress for that parking lot, especially for the drive-through, is coming in right to the northern part of that parking lot. So everyone in that parking lot that would want to go to the main building is going to have traffic coming in front of that to get to the fast food drive-through, which would create obviously another safety situation. Is there a possibility to reconfigure that somewhere so that traffic is not impacting the pedestrians trying to get to the main building?
Well, the issue is really your relationship to 206 and within, you want to have some distance between 206 before trying to turn a left movement into the site. So the logical place is where we have placed it. So I don't readily see the ability to efficiently rework that area without substantially losing a few parking spaces. So I think the efficiency we've got here works. It's not unusual to have a layout such as this, and it's an area where you're driving in a parking lot and you've got proper sight lines designed. So from that standpoint, it is functional.
Mr. Pankey, Bob Euro, what is the queue in the drive-through lane from the window, I guess, to the point of the last parking stall on that entrance drive? Looks like about 6 or 7 cars.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I would say it's about six vehicles, which is an average queue provided for a drive-through.
Okay, thank you.
I'll let someone else talk some more if they have any other people have any more questions about the parking. The only thing else I would ask with regards to the intersection at 206 and Andrea Drive, obviously the left turns, both going from Hamilton Road south on 206 and on Andrea Drive going north on 206. It's not a dedicated green light, so to speak, so it tends to queue up quite often during rush hour. Would you anticipate that having to be done with this project in your conversation with DOT?
It's not with this project, but that condition would be changing with the completion of the bypass. Because as I said, what's happening with that signal right now and why you get those cues is DOT has timed that thing with 140-second cycle length. That's an extremely long cycle length. And it's obviously done that way in order to move the substantial northbound, southbound volumes on 206. With the relief of those volumes, there's two things that the DOT should be doing out here, because it's part and parcel to the removal of traffic, and that's dropping the cycle length back to more normal cycle lengths in the area of 90 seconds to 100 seconds. And then you could also retime a little bit to the side streets because the lower demand on 206. Given its relationship to the signal that's just built up the road where everything comes together with the bypass, I would expect that would be done. I've tried to get some information specifically from DOT on this intersection with regard to the retimings and how they're handling that, but they have not yet shared that with me.
Okay. That's all I have for now, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Committeeman. Anybody on the board?
Once. Parking. If things get back to normal and restaurants get back to full capacity, etc., that restaurant does have catering halls. So during holidays or christenings, graduations, I think they have 2 catering halls that go between 50 and 100 people. So that would be another overflow as far as parking goes if they got two functions going along with the restaurant. So we're talking about how much parking we have there.
Yeah, and I guess that's something the owner will have to take into account as they work out their other tenancies in this site.
Yeah, so Mr. Pankey, that's kind of my question. I just I know you're kind of doing your report a bit blind. I'm just a little worried that depending upon the ultimate mix of what the tenant mix is there, which maybe is known, maybe is not. How can we adequately say that the parking, which is pretty significant deviation from what we would expect, that's going to be sufficient without knowing the mix of the types of businesses that are going to be included in the commercial space? I'm struggling to understand your rationale there.
Yeah, and I understand that, and it becomes a management part of the management by the owner in his marketing and sales of it to his tenants. I mean, he controls who goes where and what is the right users on this site based upon what he's basically allocated through the tenancies. I mean, it's not to the owner's benefit to have tenancies that don't have supportive parking. So in looking at the mix of types of tenants that he's going to pair to this site, he would look to try to accomplish some morning traffic generators versus lunchtime generators versus the nighttime generators. And you look to create that mix, particularly in an area where you're establishing, a mixed use development with other commercial and ultimately, hopefully, a more walkable Main Street. So it is a little bit of a trust that the owner also wants his success, the success of his center, and he's going to manage his infrastructure properly. And it's been done, and it can be done, and it's right. I mean, the options here, are to continue to have parking in that little point instead of adding a drive-through and creating more parking that may not be used at all. In this situation, I think what we're trying to do is accomplish some of the vision of the township by bringing some of the retail forward, landscape everything to a higher degree than has been on this site forever, and use that to attract and create the type of environment that they believe can give them the ability to be selective on their tenancies. And that's what we're proposing here. And you know, the owner understood this when they came in with this. You are right, it is an aggressive reduction in parking, but we think the balance that we've achieved with all of the other elements that your ordinance looks to accomplish here is appropriate. And as I said, we could, if the board wanted to or would grant relief, we could rework the parking with 9x18 parking spaces, and we could increase the parking count someplace between 10 to 20 spaces by doing that. If the board's desirous of that, would grant that additional variance on the parking space. In my opinion, it's an appropriate parking stall. You're not giving up any safety or any of that. And we certainly would be willing to work with Mr. Euro in adjusting the parking and increasing the count a little bit.
Mr. Delcourt, I'd also like to weigh in and perhaps give you some more comfort, and perhaps Ron can weigh in as well. One of the most important factors as a practical matter in leasing is the prospective tenants want to make sure that their customers can come. So they will look at the site, and if they don't think there's adequate parking, they'll abandon our site for a better site in their view. So it's almost self-policing and self-regulating. And I'd ask Ron if he could weigh in and confirm that's been our experience over the course of many, many hundreds of thousands of square feet of retail that we rent over the course of this and 6 or 7 other states. Ron, can you weigh in and perhaps give Ms. Delcourt a comfort level that this is not going to be a problem?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Doug, and this is a situation where, you know, we have to control who our tenants are, so we don't just put all restaurants or all certain types of businesses in are going to create problems because, you know, as my boss always said, a parking problem is a good problem to have. It means your center's successful, but there's a breaking point where you get past it's a problem and your tenants start to leave because their customers can't find parking. And that's something that we have to maintain and control through our internal commercial environment. So to Carl's point, if there's an issue out there, we know we can't lease it to another restaurant. We're going to do a retailer because it's going to be different hours and have the parking available. So that's something that we control internally. We're well aware of, and we know what we have to do. It's not to our benefit to have a site that fails because of parking.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I hope you can understand just the concern here. I have no doubts of the owner's business savvy and his ability to manage his tenant. He's shown that over and over again. I want to be sure that one, we're setting this up for success across the board, because if it's a scenario where it's self-limiting, right, then it's also a limited tenant base, which then, what I don't want to have happen is, because you now have a limited tenant base, that you have a continued vacant commercial front in an area where we're trying to build a flourishing commercial environment. So that's really my concern, is just
Mr. Delcourt,
I'm not setting it up to be more problematic than it would need to be.
And I appreciate that. And the two things I will add is that, to your point, we have a site in Galloway.
You have a site where?
In Galloway Township.
Thank you.
And to your point, it has very limited parking. And we struggled there with a lot of restaurant use. The site is 100% occupied. We went out and found other tenants to occupy. Mr. Morris, the principal of the company, is not somebody who just rents a space for the sake of renting a space. He's very selective whose tenants are. I will point out is that, Mr. Bowler didn't really cover, or didn't, if he did, I missed it, but one of the things we're trying to do. Township has a requirement of.
I lost him.
One of the things we're trying to do.
One of the things we're trying to do.
Sorry.
Mr. Allenbach, it might be, this is Fred from IT, it might be beneficial if you cut your video. It might help in your transmission audio wise.
I'll try that.
Okay, so one
Thank
of the
you.
things we're trying to do.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure where I left off. Could you repeat that, Tina? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
One of the things we're trying to do.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you were
Right.
saying,
So-
Mr. Bowler really didn't cover. If he did, I missed it. But one of the things that we're trying to do.
Yeah, is to comply with the township's requirement for the larger parking spaces. And it's my understanding from Mr. Bowler, by going to the existing 9-foot wide spaces to 10-foot wide spaces, there's a reduction of 15 spaces. If the board were to be more concerned about the parking, and less concerned about the width, because it's a smaller shopping center, if we went to the 9-foot spaces, we could pick up, I think, around 15 or 16 spaces, more additional parking to lessen that burden, if you will. It's just, again, it's something I'm just putting out there.
Give you a higher comfort level, Mr. Delcor, or other members of the board?
I'll maybe defer to Dave or Ron or Bob just to find out what. I think a little more would be beneficial. Just given the pretty significant disparity in what we would expect. But I don't know if that size width would be generally problematic in a center like this.
Again, with regard to the size of the stall, typical commercial parking spaces that you're parking in every day in the state of New Jersey is 9 by 18. The 10 by 20 is a very unusual standard.
Well, let's hear from Mr. Euro and Mr. Maskey.
So, Bob Euro, just real quick, just for clarification, right now the parking deficiency as designed at the 10 by 20s is approximately 64 parking spaces deficient. If you were, based on testimony, if you're to go to the 9 by 18, you can pick up anywhere from, approximately on an average 15 spaces. So now you're at a deficiency of 50 spaces. So it really becomes a matter for the board. Are they comfortable with that area? The testimony being provided by the applicant that they can monitor their tenants. I know one of the board members had originally mentioned that there's catering and other events that happen in that existing building that may, exacerbate the parking situation. I'd have to ask Mr. Maskey, I know, is that permitted use in the zone? I don't know offhand. But you're really looking 15, you're still at a deficiency of like 50 spaces, and that would be up to the comfort of the board. Mr. Penke is correct. 9 by 18s are more standard space. It's they are accepted throughout the state. It is part of the RSIS and a lot of other development standards. And on those occasions where that parking lot does have overflow, you do have the one on the opposite side, adjacent to the additional retail, where people will park, and they'll just have to, walk across the drive aisle. It's not uncommon, but it's really the comfort level of the board. 50 spaces, 50 to 60 spaces is quite a bit of a deficiency, but Mr. Penke's testimony is that he believes that, the site can handle it.
Excuse me, this is Fred from IT. I just want to make note that Mr. Scobo dropped again about a minute ago. So sorry to interrupt.
David?
No, I have nothing to add to what Bob said. I think he's correct. if you pick up 15 spaces, you're still at a fairly large deficiency. As far as the stall size goes, the board generally on the commercial project sticks with the 10 by 20, but if there's no supermarket in here, for instance, the argument for a 9 by 18 is a little bit stronger. So again, we don't know who the tenants are, but it does depend to some extent on the tenancy in terms of the stall sizes.
And Bob Euro again, and just another note, even if the applicant was to eliminate the proposed drive-through restaurant, you know, your parking requirement is going to go down by about 10 or 12 spaces. You're still going to have a deficiency of now up to maybe 30 to 35 spaces. So I think with the redesign at the 10 by 20s, for better utilization and better circulation, with even the existing buildings that are there, I think you're going to have a parking deficiency. It's just the way that site is configured, and I don't believe it's prudent to knock down any of the existing buildings.
We agree.
Well,
And of course,
Mr. Euro,
dealing with an existing structure. Oh, go ahead, Ron.
yeah, the one thing I just want to mention when Mr. Euro mentioned about dropping the pad site, which is obviously something that the town desired with their, town center, but, yeah, we are deficiency, but by losing the pad, you pick up a bunch more parking spaces. I mean, the drive-through itself and the pad eat up a large area of the site that could pick up an additional 25 or whatever, 30 spaces. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but again, that was something that was, talked about with pushing the building up close and having this town center effect. So I agree with you that if the pad went away, the parking efficiency gets significantly reduced. But yeah, I stick with the, I think this from our standpoint as the owner and, managing it, it's manageable for us. But again, it's a board decision.
Chairman.
Chairman, if I could ask also, is it possible in the, I'll call it the entrance way to the parking lot that goes to the drive-through especially, to keep the traffic slow for people coming in and out, to either add some sort of speed bumps or striping or something to make people not excessive speed as they're driving to the drive-through?
Mr. Chairman, if I can, if we're going to add anything, and I'll just make sure Carl's listening, but I would prefer what we call a speed table, which is not a speed hump. It serves the same purposes, but from a plowing and maintenance standpoint, it's more effective. It's just a more or less a raised crosswalk with, Belgian block or something laid on its side. So it's kind of like a cobblestone road that's maybe raised a half inch off the ground to provide the same effect.
You okay with that, Mr. Euro?
Yeah, unfortunately, looking at the site layout, in order to put a speed table, now you're going to be, you'd have to lose at least one parking space, because I would recommend that speed table be at the midpoint of that two-way drive aisle, so that it provides, it does what it's supposed to do. You don't want the speed table at the entrance, where the stop sign is. That's not going to work. And I agree that speed bumps are really not ideal, because they do tend to get ripped out by plows. I understand Mr. Lapani's concern. I mean,
Mr. Euro, maybe I misunderstood. I thought he meant on the main drive aisle coming off of 206, not the one when you make the left to go to the drive-through. I apologize. I agree with you at that circumstance.
Well, let's get clarification from Mr. Lapani, which the areas he just.
Yeah, the main drive, once they make the left into the parking lot, so they're be, kind of cruising straight through the parking lot to get to the drive-through, right?
Right.
Then I retract my statement. I apologize.
So Mr.
Euro's point really doesn't work.
To cross that road, and also people looking to back out of those parking areas that are right up against the buildings with limited sight because they're, they can't see what's on the other side of those parking areas. So there's a potential, obviously, of these cars coming down if they're coming too fast to get to that drive-through, that there are people backing in and out, and also people walking across that aisle.
Bob Euro again. Mr. Lapani, I agree. Again, I would defer to Mr. Penke to provide additional testimony, but that is a pretty common movement through most shopping center or retail parking lots. Other than putting signage up, I'm not sure what you could do to slow traffic down in that section where the icon is right now on the screen. But I'll defer to Mr. Penke to provide some additional testimony.
Carl, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I can think of any situation where we've used something in a mid-block parking lot. I can't think of anything offline. I mean, this is a very short segment, so you're really not developing any kind of speed along the course of 13 spaces or 130 feet. After you make that left.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, we've done this before where we have it's almost like a raised striped, and I'm not sure what the pattern is, but it's like a raised stripe thing. It acts the same as almost like a rumple strip. It's not.
Yeah, well, they're rumble strips. You see them at toll plazas, and that is an option because they wouldn't impede movements in and out of a parking space. That's basically probably something that could be used in this situation with some pavement markings just indicating slow. So that is
Right.
I think the most intrusive you're going to do in this area.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Mr. Bernstein.
it's about 10:20.
Yeah, I've been watching the clock here.
Can I make a suggestion? Because we are obviously not going to finish Mr. Penke's testimony potentially on cross. And obviously the applicant has at least one more witness for this evening that I don't know how long it's going to take. Maybe what makes sense is for the experts to try to get together on this parking and other related issues between now and the next hearing and see if we can come up with a resolution or at least a proposal. Obviously subject to Mr. Wolfson and his client agreeing to this.
Well, we certainly want to accommodate whatever the board thinks is appropriate, but we're pretty comfortable with Mr. Penke's testimony and that of Mr. Allenbach and the explanation that I tried to give to Mr.
I'm all I'm saying is at the moment, Doug, is that we still haven't. I don't know if there's still any members of the boards that still have to talk. I don't know if there's any public left for Mr. Penke. All I'm saying is you've got at least a planner.
I think we can finish because what I was going to say is simply that we're okay if the board wants to tell us we would like you to have another 10, 15 parking spaces by making it 9 by 18. Our notice provides for the kinds of things that allow the board to make those requests. Remember, this potential Panera Bread or whatever in the front, this emanated from the municipality to us to add this to the existing center. We're trying to accommodate that. Obviously, there was a parking deficiency. We're dealing with an existing structure. It's not like we're coming in and trying to put something in that wasn't already there. So frankly, we'll accept as a condition changing the spaces from 10 by 20 to 9 by 18 if that's the board's preference. We're prepared to accept as a condition putting in a rumble strip if that makes Mr. Delacour, Mr. Lapani much more comfortable. We'll accept that as a condition. But I'm comfortable that we stand on Mr. Penke's, Mr. Allenbeck's, and my explanation to the board. And subject to the board having more questions, we're finished with Mr. Penke and we're ready to move on to our last witness.
The reason I bring it up is the board's normal is 10:30. We stop taking additional testimony. At best, 11 o'clock, we stop testimony, period.
Well, I think we're finished. I mean, I can't anticipate what is going to happen next, but let's find out.
It's up to the board.
Well, the next move would be to open it to the public. Last time we opened it to the public, there wasn't anybody, but there's no guarantees about that. So if you want to try that, then you can go to the next witness at 10:30, and then we could wrap it up at 11 to try to plow through this. But there's no guarantee in terms of, how long the public's gonna either be on or not on the
Well, let's go. And if it turns out that there are large numbers of members of the public that have questions, they are entitled to be heard and have their questions answered. But let's go. Let's see where we go.
All right,
What
Fred,
other
you want to take
witnesses
it
are
then?
left to be called?
Sure.
I'm sorry?
What other witnesses does he have to call yet?
Just the planner will be very brief, 15 minutes probably.
Is there is there an architect that's going to go over the plans and designs of the main building? I haven't seen that yet.
We're not planning on putting up an architect to testify.
Why not? We haven't seen what's going to go on with the main buildings, what design standards and how they're going to be designed.
We don't know who our tenants are. We don't know what their requirements are going to be. We will comply with all the material and other requirements of the ordinance, and we'll certainly work with Mr. Maskey and Mr. Euro in terms of making sure that we comply with.
Are we talking about the main commercial building, Mr. Lapani, or the residential?
Yeah, the main commercial buildings, how they're going to redo the facades. That shouldn't matter what tenants they are. How they're going to make them, are they going to leave it the same way? Are they going to do improvements to the outsides?
We're not planning on calling it. Ron, is that something that you feel comfortable explaining to the board members? Ron,
I would think that was something that we would want to take a look at. We seem to do that with every other applicant. I don't know why there would be an exception in this case.
Exactly right.
Hang on a second.
Ron?
I'm also kind of concerned. I understand, I understand the parking, and I understand going to the, the smaller stalls. I understand that, but to me, it's, you're still 50 short. That's, you're not talking 10 or 15. That's a concern that I have, but that's been expressed by other members of this committee as well.
Ron, can you provide any information with regard to the type of materials that will be used in the facades of the new buildings?
I don't really think the type materials, I'd like to see it as what it would look like, which you aren't prepared to give.
Well, how about we do this? This is a fair comment and a fair question, and we don't have that tonight. And we clearly have to carry that in order for us to do those kinds of things. I'm not sure how definitive those elevations will be. If you've been doing this a long time, you know that sometimes what the elevations look like and what the ultimate product is are not always the same, depending upon what the tenant requirements are. But we can certainly do that, and you're entitled to that, and we should do that for the next meeting. But I would like to finish with our experts and the members of the public, if we can, subject to coming back for that issue.
I'm not sure if that's going to work, Mr. Bernstein. I would say, like, if we carry it over, then that would be part of this whole process. But I would ask you to chime in on that.
I think at this point, let's see if there's any members of the public who have any questions of the traffic engineer. Let's start with that.
Okay, Fred, you want to open it up to the public, please?
Sure. Again, this is questions for the traffic engineer. Please state your name and address for the record, spelling your last name. I do see one. So, Mr. Foley, if you could state your name and address and spell your last name for the record.
Sure. It's Michael Foley. That's F as in Frank, O-L-L-I, 38 Garrettson Lane, Hillsborough, New Jersey. And for full disclosure, I am a member of the Hillsborough Township Environmental Commission. My question for the traffic engineer is, A couple of things. Was there any consideration given to get rid of that main thoroughfare that goes right through the middle, and continues through the middle of the two existing buildings? It seems like it was a bad design in the 60s, and keeping it, might be problematic as well. And as part of that, was there a consideration of closing that left turning lane right in front of the existing restaurant to alleviate or eliminate that potential queuing backing in front of the existing restaurant and blocking existing patrons parking in front of that restaurant? It just seems like there's a better way that traffic can be circulated.
No, I mean, the access road is obviously the intent is to keep the buildings. The access road connectivity to the rear is important. It provides connectivity to the residential and circulation around the building to the rear. I wouldn't say this is an outdated road. In fact, some of the nicest centers around, the Grove, for example, has a design with a connector road. We're actually improving that road. We're expanding the sidewalks on the sides, eliminating the parallel parking, and making it a better experience driving through there. And the purpose of these roads are to provide the connections to the parking lots. This is a commercial, residential, mixed-use environment, and your hierarchy of roads are intended to lead to parking aisles, which lead to parking spaces. So the design here is appropriate and functional and safe.
Thank you, Carl.
In that regard, and you mentioned using the existing building, and maybe this is a question for your planner. If it is, please let me know. But if we're so intent on maintaining the existing circulation, vehicular circulation through this lot, was there any consideration, even might not have been your first preference, of just demoing the existing main building, starting from scratch, putting in more of a village type open access, open space village type area that can be a true gateway to our new Main Street?
Well, certainly economics are involved in these types of decisions. The project has to work, and we are actually changing the circulation. The project has been rethought out. I mean, if you're familiar with the site, there's pavement to the north end of the property, to the south end, around the buildings. All of that has been eliminated and cleaned up and become landscaping, particularly to the east and west along Andrea and along the residential neighborhood. So the circulation components of this are being modernized and rethought in a logical manner, consistent with the ideas of supporting the Main Street and walkable community and bringing in those elements. But part of the project is intended to maintain and reface and reuse these buildings so that the project actually pans out for everyone, for the town and for the owner.
Okay. Going back to my original question, though, again, two main concerns: crossing that main, entrance driveway from one parking lot to the other parking lot. If people have to spill over from one to the other, I know you said there's sidewalks along the new proposed driveway, but maybe you mentioned crosswalks. I don't know. But what about crosswalks? And again, what about closing off with a curb that left-hand turn lane right in front of the existing restaurant and putting it somewhere else? I don't believe you answered those questions.
I did. The plan does incorporate crosswalks between both sides of the commercial elements at logical locations. And I don't have a problem with that left turn. I think the left turn in front of the building is in a logical location. It's away from Route 206. It's I think well designed. I understand the concern as it's being expressed, but I don't share that concern. I think you can look up and down the 206 corridor and the Route 1 corridor, and you'll find very similar designs all over the place that have operated safely for years. And that's, but that being said, if there's some additional things we can add to this that make the board a little more comfortable, we'll certainly look to see what we can come up with and bring it back to the board.
Thanks, Carl.
Okay. Ooh. That's all the questions I had for the traffic engineer. Mr. Chairperson, I did try to raise my hand earlier. I had a couple of environmental questions for the environmental expert or whoever is presenting that. I would like to know if I have an opportunity now to ask those. I lost my connection earlier, and being that the expert is still here today, he may not be here next time. I wonder if I would be afforded that opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, we don't object to that. And it's clear, as you and Mr. Bernstein indicated, that we're not going to finish tonight. It's clear now, certainly.
Yeah.
So why don't we finish up with the questions from the public as to this or other witnesses, and then call it a night, and give us a new date, and we'll come back with elevations and our planning testimony. That seems to make sense.
I mean, I would
Hey.
agree with that, Mr. Wilson, especially since there was still some issues that were hanging out there that Deputy Mayor brought up, some of the architectural things. So,
Mr. Chairman, can I ask for a motion for the board to continue this testimony?
yeah, we would need, okay, so let's have a motion from the board to continue the testimony.
That was Frank.
Dean, did you get that?
Motion to-
Yeah, Frank moved it. We need a second.
Okay. So the motion,
Second from Peason. All in favor?
aye, aye.
Thank you. Let's go on.
We will continue.
Mr.
All right,
Foley, your questions?
For the environmental person?
Yes.
Okay, I'll make it quick.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Foley, I'm sorry, it's Ron Ollenbeck. You mentioned me about being the expert. I'm not the environmental expert. By no means.
Okay,
I'm reading
my apology.
off a script that I got from my
Well, let's
environmental.
see what the question is, and maybe one you can comfortably
No.
answer, and if it's not, we'll bring an environmental person back.
That was going to be my point, is that I know Mr. Julian had some questions. Mr. Foley has some questions. Whatever the board wants, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be at the next hearing.
Well, why don't we see if Mr. Foley, what Mr. Foley's questions are, and maybe we can answer them, maybe we
Sure.
can't.
Sure.
Yeah, you may very well be.
Okay.
Just regarding the tree cutting seasonal restrictions, the EC mentioned on top of page 2 of our EC memo. Just again, to have reassurance that the construction will abide by any tree cutting seasonal timing restrictions as per any DRCC or DEP approvals.
Yes, we agree.
Okay. Told you that one was easy. And just a question, maybe I'm just confused, which is possible. You had mentioned that, and I've seen the LOI, the Wetland Letter of Interpretation from April 9th, I believe, 2020, that did not mention or did not show or designate any wetlands on the site. But then you submitted an application in October of 2020 for a freshwater wetland general permit 6 for an isolated wetland pretty much in just above the center of the site. So I was wondering, did something change from the April 2020 LOI? Was there new information? Why is there that discrepancy?
Brad?
Yeah, there was an LOI there was a presence absence letter that was issued. So absence letter was issued that we did not have on file. So we have that now on file, and we withdrew that application.
Okay, so if I understood you, the April 9th, 2020 LOI you didn't have on file. You went without having that. You submitted for GP6. You then obtained the April 2020 LOI, and then therefore withdrew the GP6.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And last question, for the DRCC approval, you are still coordinating with the DRCC? Is that correct?
Yeah, our application has been submitted. We received comment letters back. We resubmitted back this evening for revisions.
And that was revisions to their comment letter of November 19th, 2020?
Yes.
So all those, all right, so all those, that their comment letter has been addressed. You provided responses and you're waiting for responses and potential approval?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Foley.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cole.
Mr. Wilson, I have a question of you as to Ms. Cafone. Is somebody going to produce testimony on the makeup of the residential building? I.e. bedroom
Makeup,
mix?
Number of bedrooms?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Bernstein. I think, Mr. Bernstein, that's you asking?
That's
hard to
me
say.
asking, Ron.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah,
it
I
doesn't
will.
have to be,
cover
it
that.
doesn't have to be tonight. I'm just asking the question when we come back.
Yes.
I think we
Yeah, no,
need
I will
to
cover
put that
that.
on record.
Yeah, I will cover that as part of the architectural presentation.
All right.
Any other members of the public, Eric? Or
Yeah, this is Fred up from IT. I'll check. Is there anybody else from the public that has questions for the traffic engineer? I see none, Chairman, so you can proceed.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Eric, what's our next move here then?
Well, our next move is actually to ask the applicant to grant an extension of the time of decision rule, because the time of decision rule is January 4th. So unless they want us to turn him down, which I doubt,
you're
we
such
need
a
an
kidder, Eric.
well, hey,
The
look,
COVID's
you
going
know,
to your head.
God, yeah, it probably has. God,
Of course, we'll give you the extension. What's the next date that you would
well,
schedule?
that was actually, you anticipated the question of David.
Okay, so as you know, the board knows, the next meeting is January 14th, which is the reorganization meeting at 7:30. We have a regular meeting, which is Campus Associates. That'll take all that night. January 28th, we have the CP East Brunswick Cisner site plan. That will take all night. February 4th, we have a subdivision that we're holding it for. Well, it shouldn't take that long, but having said that, the next fully empty date is February 11th. Now, with the footnote, of course, that none of these dates actually exist until the board reorganizes and adopts a new calendar on January 14th.
Would it be too much of a burden, Mr. Chairman, to ask for a special meeting? I mean, we're basically almost finished. We have one witness and the pictures from the architect. So, and I can't imagine that we're talking about even 45 minutes.
Well, the issue with a special meeting is pretty much the board normally meets first, second, and occasionally the fourth Thursday. They're not meeting in the first Thursday in January because we now wait until after the governing body designates who the members are going to be. So, and if the board wants to have a meeting on a night it normally doesn't have, or wants to put this applicant first on the February 4th meeting, that's pretty much where we are. The January 14th meeting is another affordable housing application that's continuing. And the 28th, I mean, David, are we going forward with that application?
Yes, they've told us they are, yeah.
They have finally decided.
Actually, we had to ask their permission to move them from January 14th to January 28th, and they've granted that.
Do we anticipate the February 4th meeting taking a subdivision all night?
No, well, like I said, it shouldn't.
Well, I mean,
it's a relatively minor subdivision.
No,
Well,
Dave, Eric, we'll just take the 11th. If the board, I don't want to impose, the board's
well, that's
already.
fine. I mean, if the author would put you first on the 4th and get it done. It's up to you.
Well, if we put us first on the 4th so we can get done, obviously that would be okay. But I think that I'd have to check with my witnesses, and I'm getting a text from Christine, who's the last witness, that the 4th is a conflict for her. So let's
Okay,
do
so the 11th, we need a TOD to the end of February.
I'll give it to you to the 11th at 12:00. No, of course you can have it.
To the end of February?
You have a form.
And remember, this, he was this charming and amusing when he was on the bench too.
Do you have a form for us to fill out, or would you like me to send a letter?
We will, can Deborah get it to?
Sure, we can give you one.
We'll send you one, Doug. Okay.
I've gotten a lot smarter since I left the bench.
So for the purpose of the record, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is agreeing to continue this application to February 11th at 7:30 or soon thereafter as the matter may be heard, with no further notice required. They will grant an extension on the time of decision rule through February 28th, 2021. And hopefully in the interim, the parties can try to resolve some of the issues that got addressed during the testimony tonight.
You might make it March 1.
What? March 1?
Monday, you might make it March 1.
Okay, March 1st. Okay.
So we need a roll call
motion
for
to that. We need a well, you need a
Motion to
motion because I
continue.
can't make them.
Okay, let's have a motion for that.
So moved.
Mr. Lapani,
Second.
I think Mr. Wagner, but
Okay, Tina, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, you may. Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Peason,
Yes.
Mr. Santaromita,
Yes.
Mr. Scobo.
He's not on.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Ciccarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Emick,
Yes.
Mr. Delcor,
Yes.
Mr. Lapani,
Yes.
and Mr. Julian.
Yes.
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Wolfson, and your witnesses.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, everybody. Stay safe and happy holidays.
Please, everybody
You
the
also.
same.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Tina, I don't know if that's your dog. Tina, is that your dog barking again?
Yeah. He's old. He can't hold it anymore.
Happy
So-
holidays, everybody.
Before I call for a motion for adjournment, I just want to take a second and wish everybody a happy holiday, a safe and happy holiday. I want to thank everybody for their service this year on the planning board. I know it was a very unusual year, but I think we did a lot of work, and I commend everybody for their service, both the volunteers and also the professionals. So thank you for that. And with that said, I guess we need a motion for, I'm sorry, Tina, didn't I mention you?
He's a professional.
You're a professional, right? Fred, also, I can't see you, but thank you. And Tina,
Most
thank you.
important professional.
That's right.
Mr. Chairman, before you take a motion to adjourn, I'd like to remind the board, the next meeting will be Zoom as well. It'll be 7 o'clock. On the 14th of January, it is our reorganization meeting. We will have a regular meeting that follows at 7:30 also by Zoom. So I'm just reminding everybody that you get a month off.
Okay, yeah, and I don't know how much longer the Zoom will continue, but I don't see it going away in the foreseeable
Months
future.
and months.
And months and months. So, okay, so with that being said, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Thank
Tina.
you all.
Hey, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Happy
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Take care.